Hello everyone, welcome to Paranormal M. Thanks for being here tonight. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more stories like these. Also, turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos. And if you've had your own unexplained experience, feel free to send it to me. So the first story tonight is about someone alone in their apartment late at night, just trying to make a cup of tea because they couldn't sleep. At first, it seemed like nothing, but then the kitchen started feeling like they weren't alone in it. Hope you enjoy the video and sleep well tonight. You know, something happened not too long ago that still gets under my skin whenever the apartment goes quiet at night. It was sometime after midnight. I live alone in a pretty small apartment and I couldn't sleep, so I figured I'd make myself some tea and try again. My kitchen is tiny, nothing special. There's an old gas stove, a little table with a few chairs, and these worn-out cabinets that creak every time you touch them, like they've been hanging on for decades out of pure stubbornness. I turned on the stove, set the kettle down, and leaned against the counter while I looked at my phone. Everything was still. Just the low hum of the refrigerator, that kind of late-night silence that makes every little sound feel bigger than it should. Then I heard this soft click behind me. It sounded exactly like a cabinet door easing shut. The strange part was, I hadn't opened any cabinets. I remember pausing for a second and trying to explain it away. Old apartment, old wood, things shift, that kind of thing. But then I noticed the kettle wasn't making any sound at all. No faint rattle, no steam, nothing. So I looked over, and the stove had gone out. Not only that, but the knob was turned all the way to off. I just stood there staring at it, because I knew I hadn't touched it. And then I noticed one of the chairs by the table. It was pulled out. Not a lot, but enough to be obvious. Slightly angled too, like someone had been sitting there a moment earlier and had just gotten up. I always keep the chairs pushed in because there's barely enough room to move around in that kitchen as it is. I would have noticed if I'd bumped it. By then, my chest was already tightening up. I kept trying to be rational, telling myself maybe I'd moved it without thinking. Maybe I was just tired. You know how people do that, trying to make everything make sense when it very clearly doesn't. So I turned the stove back on, mostly because I didn't know what else to do, and reached for my favorite mug from the cabinet. It's this old, dark blue mug with a little crack near the handle. I use it all the time. Except it wasn't in the cabinet. It was already sitting on the counter beside the kettle, and when I touched it, it was warm. Not just room temperature. Warm, like someone had been holding it in their hands only seconds before. That was the moment I really started to panic. I froze. I didn't want to turn around, but I also felt like I had to. And while I was just standing there, I felt this sudden cold draft move right behind my legs. Not like air from a window. It felt more like someone passing close behind me. And then I heard it. A whisper. Very low, very faint, like someone murmuring something I couldn't quite make out from right over my shoulder. I spun around so fast I nearly stumbled into the chair. There was nothing there. Just the kitchen, the refrigerator humming, the dim light over the stove, and me standing there with my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was shaking my whole body. I didn't finish making the tea. I turned the stove off, left the mug exactly where it was, and went straight back to my room. I kept every light on for the rest of the night. And honestly, I still think about it. More than I want to. Because I know how it sounds. I do. But I also know what I saw, what I felt, and what I heard. And I've never gone into that kitchen after midnight the same way again. This happened around 5 years ago, and even now, I still get chills when I think about it. My aunt had just moved into a new apartment in this quiet residential complex, and it was during the summer, right before I started high school. I went to stay with her for a couple of weeks. The apartment had 2 bedrooms. My aunt slept in one, and I stayed in the other with my older cousin, who was about 8 years older than me. The room was pretty cramped, so we had to share a bed. The outlets were in such awkward spots, one near the headboard and one down by the foot of the bed, that we ended up sleeping in opposite directions. My cousin slept with her head near the top of the bed, and I slept with mine near the bottom. Right above her side of the bed, there was this big window that looked out toward another apartment building in the same complex. From where I was lying, I could see directly into one of the apartments across from us. My cousin always fell asleep early, but I've always been the kind of person who stays up way too late. Back then, I'd often still be awake until almost dawn. And that's when I started noticing something strange. Every single night, at exactly 4:03 in the morning, the light in that apartment would switch on. Always the same room, always the same light. Then, at exactly 4:06, it would turn off. Not 4:02, not 4:04, always 4:03 to 4:06. 3 minutes every night, without fail. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it had to be nothing. But after seeing it happen again and again with that same eerie precision, I couldn't stop thinking about it. One night, I asked my cousin to stay up and watch it with me. She didn't really believe me at first, but she agreed. And sure enough, at 4:03, the light came on. At 4:06, it went off. The look on her face told me everything. She was completely shaken. The next morning, she told my aunt, and after that, all 3 of us couldn't stop talking about it. We were unsettled, obviously, but more than anything, we wanted to understand what was going on. A few days later, we worked up the nerve to go over there and ask. A woman, probably in her 40s, opened the door. She seemed gentle and soft-spoken, but exhausted in a way that was hard to miss. She explained that she was the daytime caregiver for the woman who lived there, an elderly lady in her 80s who had been left completely paralyzed after a stroke. She said the woman could only move her eyes and mouth. She had no husband, no children, no close family around. Just a very small pension that barely covered basic care. The caregiver could only stay from 6 in the morning until 11 at night because there simply wasn't enough money for overnight help. So every night, from 11 p.m. until 6 a.m., that woman was alone. Then the caregiver told us something that made the whole thing even harder to process. The elderly woman had a serious condition with her eyes. She was extremely sensitive to light, so much so that she had begged the caregiver never to turn on the lights inside the apartment unless it was absolutely necessary, especially not during the night. But we had watched that light turn on night after night, and according to the caregiver, the woman never even left her bedroom. I remember all of us going quiet after that. We thanked her, probably a little too quickly, and just left. I still can't explain what we saw. It was the consistency that got to me. The exact timing, every single night. And then the strangest part of all, it stopped completely not long after the old woman passed away. To this day, my aunt, my cousin, and I still talk about it sometimes, trying to make sense of it, and none of us ever can. But whatever it was, I've never forgotten it. I honestly do not know whether this falls under the paranormal or whether life was just being deeply weird with me, which, frankly, it often is. But it is one of the strangest things I have ever experienced. There has been this same person, or at least someone who looked exactly like him, showing up at different points in my life, always in different places, always just for a moment. The first time I remember seeing him was at a high school football game during the first few weeks of my freshman year. It was one of those big school nights where everyone was out walking around during halftime, heading to the snack bar or the restrooms, talking with friends. Out of nowhere, this guy ran right up to me and called out my name like he knew me well. Then he hugged me and said he was really happy to see me. And the strange part was, he looked familiar to me too. I remember standing there thinking, I know this face, but from where? I was raised by a single mom, and growing up I spent a lot of time in after-school programs, day camps, summer activities, that kind of thing. So I figured maybe we knew each other from one of those places years earlier, and I just couldn't place him. I didn't want to be awkward and ask who he was, especially since he seemed so sure he knew me. Before I could even say much, he smiled, said something like, "I have to run," and disappeared. The whole thing lasted maybe 10 seconds. After that, I never saw him at school. Not once. So I assumed maybe he had been there with another school, or just happened to be visiting. Then, the next year, during spring break, my family took a trip to Cancun. It was crowded, loud, full of tourists, and while I was walking along the beach with my family, I caught a glimpse of someone in the crowd who looked exactly like him. He didn't look at me. He just passed through the sea of people and was gone. It happened so fast that I even questioned myself afterward, but I remember thinking, that looked like the same guy from the game. Then the summer before my junior year, we went to visit relatives in California. It was my first time there. One evening, I was sitting outside a restaurant with my family when he walked right past us. This time I saw him clearly. No question in my mind, it was him. He didn't stop, didn't speak, didn't even glance my way. He just kept walking and vanished into the crowd. That was the moment it started to really get under my skin. After that, I noticed a pattern. I would go somewhere new, and somehow, somewhere in the middle of a crowd, I would see him. Always briefly, always just out of reach. During spring break of my senior year, my family took a trip through parts of New England. We stopped in Boston, Newport, Vermont, and Maine. And in every one of those places, the same thing happened. I would be out with people, look up, and there he was, walking past like he belonged there. And then, seconds later, gone. I saw him again during my first year of college, in a completely different state from where I had grown up. It was at a huge welcome ceremony for new students. I was sitting there among this massive crowd, and somehow I spotted him sitting off in the distance. I never saw him anywhere else on campus after that. The last time I saw him was years later, during my junior year of college, when a group of friends and I went to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. Same kind of moment. Busy street, packed crowd, noise everywhere, and then, suddenly there he was, just walking by. Before I could react, he disappeared again. I still don't know who he was. I don't know whether it was really the same person every time, or someone who somehow looked unbelievably similar. But his appearance was distinct enough that I've never been able to shake the feeling that it truly was him. What unsettles me most is that I've only ever seen him when I was with other people, never when I was alone and could actually go after him or ask him who he was. And after all these years, I still wouldn't even know what I'd say. I just know that, for a stretch of my life, there was this familiar stranger who kept appearing wherever I went, only long enough for me to notice him and wonder what on earth it meant. I want to tell you about the house across the street from us, because even now, I still can't make sense of it. When we moved into this neighborhood about 4 years ago, I honestly thought that place was empty. The driveway was half blocked by this huge old tree, like someone wanted to keep people out on purpose. There were no trespassing signs everywhere, and every window, even the garage windows, was covered with something. Black plastic, foil, heavy curtains. whatever they could use to keep the inside hidden. No car, no porch light, no movement, nothing. It just looked dead. A few nights after we moved in, my dog Nola took off while we were outside. She wandered toward that house, and I followed her up to the edge of the driveway, calling for her. I heard rustling in the leaves and figured it was just her messing around. But then I heard this sound coming from the garage. It sounded like barking at first, or maybe crying. I couldn't really tell. So I stepped a little closer, trying to listen. And then, out of nowhere, something slammed hard against the inside of the garage door. Not once, but over and over, loud and angry. Right after that, someone shouted from inside. I couldn't understand a word, just this muffled voice through the door. I panicked. I turned around and ran. A second later, Nola came flying back after me like she'd been spooked too. To this day, I still have no idea where she had actually gone. After a while, we realized somebody really did live there. A man, probably in his 40s or 50s, always by himself. We never had a real conversation with him. Just one moment, one afternoon, and it still burned into my mind because it was the only time I'd ever seen him out in daylight. He was walking his bike past our house, and Nola barked and trotted toward him. He didn't flinch. He just looked over calmly and said, "She bites, doesn't she?" Then he kept going like that was the most normal thing in the world. After that, I started noticing his routine. He'd leave the house around 10:30 or 11 every night. He always rode this bike with no lights on it, completely in the dark. Then he'd come back around 6:30 or 7 in the morning, just before sunrise. And the strangest part was, he never turned on a single light. Not once. That house stayed sealed up and blacked out all the time. Over the years, it almost turned into this creepy little joke in our family. We called it the ghost house. It was unsettling, sure, but it was predictable. And after a while, predictable starts to feel normal. Then last night happened. I was upstairs in my little girl's room, rocking her to sleep, and it was sometime around 11. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed this bright flashing light outside. At first I thought maybe it was a car, or somebody working on something, so I ignored it. But when I stood up and looked through the window, I saw it was coming from that house. It was flashing from inside, sharp bursts of light, almost like welding or some kind of strobe. But that wasn't even the part that got to me most. Above the roof, in the sky just over that house, there was this strange flickering glow in the clouds. It looked almost like heat lightning, but it was only there, only above his roof. The rest of the sky was dark and still. No storm, no thunder, nothing else around it. Just that strange, restless light. The house itself stayed dark except for those flashes from inside. After a while, the flashing stopped. Then I could see one thin strip of light through whatever was covering one of the windows, probably from a lamp in a back room. I could make out someone moving behind it. And then that light went out too. I went downstairs and told my husband, because I needed somebody else to see that I wasn't imagining this. We stood there at the window together, just staring across the street, trying to make sense of it. Then suddenly I saw movement. Someone came tearing away from the side of the house so fast I thought, for one awful second, that somebody was running for their life. I nearly screamed. Then I realized it was him. He was on his bike, already gliding down the street in total silence. No light, no sound, just gone into the dark like he always does. And that's what gets me. I've been watching that house for years. Never once saw a light on inside. Never once saw visitors. Never once saw anything that felt ordinary. Then, all at once, in one night, something happens that feels so wrong and so deliberate that I still can't shake it. I know how this sounds. I do. But whatever I saw, it didn't feel random. It felt like I caught a glimpse of something private, something I was never meant to witness. And the strangest part of all, my baby was restless the whole night after that. Tossing, waking, fussing, like she could feel that something was off too. Maybe that part is just me being scared. But I'm telling you, that house does not feel the same anymore. I've had strange experiences for as long as I can remember. I'm 21 now, and over the years I've learned to explain some of it away. Anxiety, an overactive imagination, too many late-night horror videos. All the usual things people lean on when something doesn't make sense. And honestly, sometimes that probably is the answer. But there are a few moments in my life that never stopped feeling real. This is one of them. When I was in middle school, maybe 7th grade, I had 2 friends over for a sleepover at my house. My bedroom was small, so back then we had rearranged everything to make it work. My bed was partly tucked into the closet space because the closet doors had been taken off, and across the room I had this old pull-out sofa where one of my friends was supposed to sleep. We were all into ghost stories at the time, the way kids are when they want to be scared but also kind of love it. So that night, we decided to play the red book game. We grabbed a red book from my parents' room, sat together in the dark, and tried to do it properly with all the seriousness we could manage. We were supposed to light a candle, but of course we forgot that part, because apparently even summoning spirits has a learning curve. We put our hands on the book, closed our eyes, said the words, asked questions, and opened the pages, tracing along until we felt like we should stop. Nothing really happened at first. No answers, no eerie message, nothing dramatic. But one of my friends, Marcy, had been sitting on a stool near my bed, and after a while she started getting annoyed. She kept insisting that someone was touching her, brushing against her, trying to freak her out. At first, none of us had done anything, but once she got worked up, we started teasing her the way girls at sleepovers do. She got fed up, stopped playing, and since we hadn't ended the game the right way, we just kind of dropped it altogether. The part that stayed with me was what happened after. For the rest of the night, Marcy sat on the sofa and kept staring at one exact spot on my bed. She barely looked anywhere else. At the time, I thought she was just trying to keep the mood creepy. But later, that detail started to matter a lot more. A while after that, I was home alone one afternoon, standing in the bathroom next to my bedroom, brushing my hair. If both doors were open, you could see from the bathroom mirror straight into my room. By then, I'd moved the furniture around, so the sofa was sitting where my friend had stared that night. And while I was brushing my hair, I got this sudden, heavy feeling that I needed to look at one specific place in the mirror. You know those moments where your body reacts before your mind can catch up? It was like that. I looked. Sitting on the sofa, reflected in the mirror behind me, was a little girl. She had pale blonde curls, almost like ringlets, and she was wearing clothes that looked old-fashioned, like church clothes that had been dragged through dirt. Not torn exactly, just grimy, worn, wrong somehow. She was just sitting there, still, like she belonged in that room. I screamed and dropped my brush. I turned around instantly and there was nothing there. No one. I was alone. Even now, I still get nervous sometimes when I'm brushing my hair, and I feel that same pull to look in the mirror. It's like part of me is afraid I'll see her again. Then she told me that when she was a girl, she also used to see an army soldier standing at the foot of her bed, and one night, beside him, there was a little girl. I froze. I didn't say anything at first. I just listened. Then my mom started describing what the girl looked like. Blonde curls, young, old-fashioned clothes. I broke down crying right there. I hadn't told her what I'd seen before she described it. I made sure not to lead her, because I needed to know whether this was really the same thing or whether my mind was trying to connect dots that weren't there. But the way she described that little girl was too close, too exact. It shook me in a way I still can't fully explain. Since then, more things have happened in this new house, too. The area has a violent history, with old battles fought nearby, and sometimes the atmosphere here feels heavy in a way that's hard to put into words. There's one experience in particular I could tell separately because it deserves its own story. But after hearing everything, my grandfather told me something that unsettled me even more. He said that on my mother's side of the family, people have always seen more than most. He said it goes back generations. Seances, spirit boards, trying to contact whatever's on the other side. People in the family apparently did all of that. I'm a devout Catholic, so hearing that didn't sit well with me at all. Not even a little. I don't know what to make of any of this. Part of me wonders whether there's some strange pattern in the way people imagine things. Like maybe when fear takes shape, it often becomes a little girl. But another part of me can't ignore how specific this was, or the fact that I wasn't the only one who saw her. That's the part that stays with me. If it had only been me, maybe I could have dismissed it. But it wasn't. And honestly, that's what still sends chills through me when I tell this story now. Hey, I need to tell you about something that's been weighing on me, because this past week in our new house has felt off in a way I can't quite explain. My husband and I moved in just over a week ago, and ever since then, there have been all these strange little things happening that keep piling up in my mind. The house itself has a history. It was custom built years ago by the original owner, an older woman named Vera, who passed away sometime around 2015. From what we heard, she was a great-grandmother, and people seemed to remember her warmly. We ended up buying the house from an older man who was moving into assisted living. He was still healthy enough to drive himself to closing, and while we were waiting on paperwork, we sat and talked with him for a while. He was unusual. I'll call him Alan. He had this odd habit of laughing at moments that really didn't fit the conversation, like at things that weren't funny at all. Maybe it was nerves, maybe just his personality, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't unsettle me. He told us he'd lived there alone for more than 20 years. Never married, no kids, just him in this big 3-bedroom house with a huge yard he never really used. Before closing, there had been an estate sale at the house. My daughter is learning piano, and there was this beautiful piano in the room that would eventually become hers, so I went by to see it. We bought it, and while I was there, I noticed people were coming in from all over, some from out of town, and they were practically scrambling to buy up Alan's old sound equipment. Not just a speaker or two either. I'm talking serious vintage gear, tall speakers, microphones, instruments, recording equipment. At closing, I mentioned how much interest there had been and asked if he'd worked in audio or music. He told me he'd been a computer scientist and that sound was just a hobby. So I asked what he meant by that, and he casually said he liked doing jigsaw puzzles while listening to music. That answer just didn't match what I'd seen. You don't usually collect that kind of equipment just to do puzzles in the background. But I let it go. Some people don't like explaining themselves, and that's their business. What made everything feel even stranger was the condition of the house. He sold it to us below asking price, even though it was in excellent shape. But then there were these little odd details everywhere. There was a shed out back that he claimed he had never opened. A spotless oven that looked brand new, like it had never been cooked in. The original microwave and dishwasher from the 80s, which he also said he'd never used. And then there were these old zippered bank bags full of personal papers, family photos, and even death certificates that he just left behind. It felt like stepping into a life that had been quietly sealed up and abandoned in pieces. Then a few nights ago, something happened that I still can't make sense of. My 14-year-old daughter and I were standing in the hallway when we both saw my husband walk into our bedroom. I had a question for him, so I went after him, and my daughter followed right behind me. We both watched him go into the bathroom connected to our bedroom. I called out to him, but he didn't answer. So I stepped into the bathroom, and it was empty. Completely empty. I turned to my daughter and asked, "Did you see him go in there too?" And she immediately said, "Yes." That's the whole reason she came with me. We searched the house, confused and honestly a little shaken, and finally found my husband downstairs in the basement doing laundry. He had never gone into the bedroom at all, and that's not even all of it. I've also seen what looked like a person standing in the stairwell. Not a shadow, not a quick flicker, but a full figure. I looked away for a second, and when I looked back, it was gone. My daughter said she's experienced something similar too. More than once, one of us has felt certain someone was in the house, only to realize nobody was there. At this point, we're all rattled. Even the dog seems on edge. We've gotten so unsettled that we called a local priest to come bless the house, and now I'm sitting here wondering whether I should actually tell him everything we've seen. Part of me feels ridiculous even saying it out loud, and another part of me knows we're not imagining how deeply uneasy this has all made us feel. I don't know what's going on in this house. I don't know whether these things are connected, or whether there's some explanation we just haven't found yet. I only know that something about this place doesn't feel right, and right now, my whole family feels it. Let me tell you something that's been sitting heavy on my mind. I grew up in South Asia, where people talk a lot about jinn, black magic, and things hidden just beyond what we can explain. Most of my life, I brushed it all aside. I always figured people were scared, grieving, unwell, or trying to make sense of something painful. Even when I heard stories inside my own family, I kept holding on to logic. I never really let myself believe. But something happened the other night, and I haven't felt settled since. It was close to 1 a.m. My internet had gone down, and I called my neighbor and friend Samir to ask if he could come over and help me out with his hotspot for a bit. He came by, sat near me while I was trying to fix things on my laptop, and then, without warning, he just went completely still. I don't mean quiet. I mean frozen. He was staring ahead, not blinking, not reacting, nothing. I said his name a few times. I even touched his shoulder and tried to shake him out of it, but it was like he wasn't really there anymore. Those couple of minutes felt stretched out and wrong in a way I can't properly explain. Then suddenly, he moved. He turned and looked straight at me, but something about him felt different. His face was calm, almost too calm, and his voice sounded lower than usual, steadier somehow. He said, "Come with me. We need to take something out." And the strange part is, I didn't feel panic. I should have, probably, but I didn't. I just felt this deep pull of curiosity, like I needed to see where this was going. So I followed him. He walked straight toward this old storage room behind his house. It's the kind of place everyone ignores. Dusty, half-broken, with a sagging roof made of wooden beams and packed mud. It smells stale in there, like damp earth and years of neglect. Nobody really uses it anymore. Samir didn't pause or look around like he was searching. He went directly to one corner and told me to hold my phone light there. Then he reached down and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in faded fabric. Inside was a folded paper charm, a tawiz. Before I could even process that, he went to another spot and pulled out a second one, then another, then one more. 4 in total. What shook me most was that he didn't hunt for them. He didn't guess. He knew exactly where each one had been hidden, like he'd been shown. After that, he came back with me, washed his hands and face, and then handed the tawiz to me. His expression was unreadable. He just said, "Get rid of these. Burn them. and let the ashes go. He wouldn't touch them again. I tried right away. I grabbed a lighter, but it wouldn't work. I found another one, and that one lit, but the papers still refused to catch. They darkened a little at the edges, but they just would not burn properly. And that's the moment something cold settled in my chest. Up until then, I'd been trying to explain everything away. But standing there with those papers in my hand, I felt, for the first time, that I was dealing with something I didn't understand. In the end, I panicked and threw them out. Then Samir suddenly dropped into prostration on the floor. He stayed there quietly for a long time, completely silent, while I just stood there watching, too stunned to move. When he finally sat up, he looked normal again. Tired maybe, but normal. I asked him what had happened. No memory. None at all. And that's what's been bothering me ever since. I'm still someone who believes in reason. I still think most things have an explanation, even when we don't know it yet. But that night cracked something open in me. I can't dismiss it the way I used to. I saw what I saw. I felt what I felt. Maybe there's an answer for it. Maybe there isn't. All I know is that something real happened that night, and I haven't been able to think about the world in quite the same way since. I need to tell you something that's been weighing on me, because I can't shake the feeling that something is deeply wrong where I live. When I was growing up, my mom used to tell me these eerie stories about things she swore she experienced, like an old man standing quietly at the foot of her bed, or a spirit that used to play harmless little games with my younger sister until one day it suddenly turned mean. Those stories terrified me as a kid, but honestly, I never really believed any of it. I always assumed there had to be some other explanation. Now, I'm not so sure. I'm 22, and about a year ago, I moved out of the tiny town I grew up in, one of those blink and you miss it places, and into a bigger town that still feels incredibly isolated. It's the kind of place with old streets, towering trees, and these beautiful, worn-down Victorian houses scattered everywhere. I ended up renting a small apartment inside one of those huge old homes that had been divided into several units. It's gorgeous, full of character, and it's only a few blocks from my job, so at first, it felt perfect. For the first couple of months, nothing seemed off. Then little things started happening. I'd walk into the kitchen and find cupboard doors hanging open, even though I'm the type of person who notices everything and always closes them. A few times I found my apartment door unlocked, which genuinely rattled me, because I'm obsessive about checking locks. I don't forget things like that. One night, I was sitting in my room gaming, headphones on, no sound anywhere except what was in my ears, when both my cat and I reacted at the exact same moment to the sound of a doorknob turning. It was so clear, so deliberate, that I immediately got up and checked both the front door and the back door, thinking maybe someone was trying to get in. But neither one sounded right. Then I turned the knob on my bedroom door, and the second I heard it, I knew. That was the sound. My cat's fur literally puffed up. I laughed about it afterward when I told a friend, because that felt easier than admitting how unsettled I was. I even joked that if there really was something here, it seemed harmless, and that I just told it to leave me alone when it got too creepy. My mom used to say that when I was little, as if spirits could be reasoned with. But things didn't stay harmless. The only thing that happened directly to me that I still can't explain was one night when I was just about to fall asleep. I was in that half-dreaming state, almost gone, when I felt someone lean in close to my ear and whisper one word. Listen. It was a woman's voice. Soft, clear, right beside me. I froze. I didn't sleep much after that. Then this past week, two other things came to light, and together they've shaken me more than I want to admit. A while back, I had texted my landlady about something minor, and that was when I found out she'd been admitted to the hospital. I wished her well and assumed she'd recover. I didn't hear anything else after that. Then recently, her husband came by the property to talk with tenants because they were planning to repaint the outside of the building. We got to talking, and he mentioned her again. That's when he told me she had died. Suddenly. Horribly. He didn't go into every detail, but the way he said it made my stomach drop. It had happened not long after that hospital visit. That was unsettling enough. But a couple of days later, my neighbor from the house next door, the one fixing it up himself, walked over to me with a bruise around his eye so bad it barely looked real. I asked him what happened, and he gave this dry little laugh and said, "Try not to fall off ladders." Then he got serious. Not stumbles, not slips, falls. Face first, like his body just gave out. He said it felt as if something hit him or pulled him off balance. Watching it made me sick. He ended up with a fractured bone around his eye and some kind of injury near his heart, but somehow he survived. I haven't been able to stop thinking about any of this. I'm scared in a way I can't really joke away anymore. I don't know whether I'm connecting random tragedies because I'm frightened, or whether there's actually some kind of pattern here. I can't afford to move, so I feel stuck, and that makes it worse. And the strangest part is that now I keep thinking about the woman who lived in the apartment below mine for a few weeks. I barely knew her, but one day I saw her hauling boxes out, and when I asked if she was leaving, all she said was, "I just can't stay here." At the time, I didn't think much of it. Now I do. So that's where I'm at. I live in this beautiful old house on Hawthorne Lane, and every day it feels a little less like a home and a little more like something is watching, waiting, or maybe trying to be noticed. I don't know whether this is grief, coincidence, old house paranoia, or something genuinely wrong. I just know I don't feel alone here anymore. Back in the late 1990s, my family and I moved into this beautiful old farmhouse near Hopkins, Michigan. It had the kind of charm that pulls you in right away, even though people around town kept whispering that the place was haunted. I didn't pay much attention to that. I'd had strange experiences before, and I figured whatever stories people were telling, I could handle it. For the first year, honestly, life there felt pretty normal. My two kids were still little, 8 and 11 at the time, and the house was usually full of noise and energy. But even then, the stories about the place never really stopped. Neighbors told us the last family had been so frightened they'd run out to the porch in the middle of the night. And one year, when my son wanted friends over for his birthday, a few parents refused to let their kids come because they were nervous about the house. Then one Friday night, everything changed. It was around 10 o'clock, and I was on the phone with a friend, telling her about this weird thing that had happened earlier. A glass bottle had suddenly burst on top of the refrigerator for no reason I could explain. While I was talking, I heard this heavy thump upstairs. It sounded exactly like one of my kids had fallen out of bed. I hung up immediately and ran upstairs, completely panicked. But when I got there, both of them were asleep, tucked in tight, peaceful as could be. That stopped me cold. I just stood there for a second, trying to make sense of it. Then, as I started back down the stairs, I heard another sound. This one came from the basement. We had our wood furnace down there, so I knew I couldn't just ignore it. I opened the basement door, and right away the air felt different, colder somehow, heavier. I reached toward the light switch, and just before I touched it, I saw something move. It was a girl. She was dressed in white, with long hair and this flowing gown, and she drifted past the bottom of the stairs so quickly, I almost questioned whether I'd really seen her. But I had. I know I had. I jumped back and slammed the door shut. My whole body was shaking. I remember standing there, trying to decide what to do, torn between fear and this feeling that I needed to go back down. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen, more for comfort than anything, and stood there with my phone in one hand and my heart pounding. When I opened the door again, it felt like the darkness itself was warning me not to come down. I flipped on the light, and there she was again, just at the far edge of it, almost out of sight. I forced myself down the steps. I called my husband at work, but it was too late and no one answered. Then I called a friend, and she told me to check the furnace. At first, everything looked normal, but then I noticed something strange. The thimble cover had been thrown several feet away from the chimney, and the heavy ash cleanout cover had somehow been shoved across the floor. It had left black streaks behind it. That was not something that could have happened on its own. When my husband got home close to midnight, he checked everything and couldn't immediately find the cause. But the next morning, he got up on the roof and found a major buildup of creosote in the chimney. We were dangerously close to a fire. If I hadn't gone down to that basement when I did, we might have lost the house, or worse. A couple of months later, I had a friend over with her kids, and I happened to overhear my son telling them something that made my blood run cold. He said a girl in white had come to see him twice. I can still remember the feeling that came over me when I heard that. It was fear, yes, but it was something else too. Gratitude. Because suddenly, all the pieces fit together. The spirit I had seen in the basement, the one that should have terrified me, hadn't been there to harm us. She was warning us. She was protecting us. That changed the way I thought about everything. We tend to assume that if something is unexplained, it must be dangerous. But that experience taught me something I've never forgotten. Not every spirit comes with darkness. Some, somehow, seem to come with mercy. And that night in that old farmhouse, I truly believe one of them was watching over us. I've wanted to tell you this story for years, mostly because it stayed with me in a way I can't really explain. Even now, thinking back on it gives me that same strange feeling I had as a kid, standing there, not fully understanding what was happening, but knowing it was something I'd never forget. This happened on Christmas Eve in 1986, when I was about 8 years old. That night, I was staying over at my cousin Mara's house. She was living with her mom and sisters at her grandmother's place across town from us, in a suburb near the San Francisco Bay Area. At that point, I was still an only child, so being in a house full of kids and adults already felt exciting and a little overwhelming. Her grandmother's house had a very particular feel to it. It was always dim, crowded with furniture and decorations, and full of shadows in a way that made everything seem older than it was. I remember this glowing oil lamp in the dining room, the kind with the slow bubbles drifting up inside, and a den with a giant entertainment center packed with stacks of VHS tapes. There was also this big aquarium glowing in the corner, and between the tank light and the TV, the whole room always had this quiet, eerie kind of warmth to it. My family usually did most of our Christmas celebrating on Christmas Eve, so we'd already opened presents earlier that night. I remember bringing some of my new action figures with me, fantasy characters and little vehicles, and Mara and I stayed up playing with them before bed. It felt like one of those perfect childhood holiday nights. There were probably 4 kids in the house altogether, and I think around 7 or 8 adults. Then, sometime in the middle of the night, everything changed. I woke up to Mara's grandmother screaming, not calling out, not startled for a second, but truly screaming for help in this panicked, desperate way that made everybody in the house jump up at once. Doors opened, people rushed down the hallway, and within seconds all the adults were crowding into the back bedroom. Mara and I followed and stopped in the doorway. We were small, and with all the adults packed in there, we couldn't really see much. The room was dark except for the hallway light spilling in. Her grandparents were sitting up in bed, facing toward us, and her grandmother was absolutely terrified. She kept crying and shaking and saying, "Oh my God," over and over again. The adults were all talking at once. Some were near the foot of the bed, some along the side, and everyone sounded confused, frightened, and loud in that way people get when they're trying to make sense of something impossible. I remember hearing them shout things like, "What is that?" and "Do you see that?" and "It's moving." Those words have never really left me. I kept trying to look past them, trying to see whatever they were seeing, but I couldn't. From where I stood, all I could make out was the dark wall beside the bed and the shapes of people blocking my view. I remember feeling frozen there, more confused than anything at first, and then scared because every adult in that room seemed genuinely shaken. A little while later, Mara's grandmother was helped out into the living room, and everyone gathered there. The kids were kept back, of course, but my mom later explained what had happened as best she could. She said Mara's grandmother had woken up and seen the face of her own mother on the wall beside the bed. Not a vague shape, not a shadow, but a face she recognized clearly. She said it didn't make any sound, but it was there, and it was real enough to send the whole room into panic. I asked my mom about it years later, hoping maybe time had made it seem less strange, or that she'd tell me there was some explanation. But from what I remember, she never really had one. She believed something happened in that room. My mom passed away 10 years ago, and one of the things that still gets to me is knowing I can't ask her about it again. I can't go back and hear the details one more time, or ask the questions I didn't know to ask when I was younger. So that's the story. It's the only experience like that I've ever had, at least directly. My mom and her brothers had their own stories from growing up, but nothing quite like this. And even though I never saw what the others claimed to see, that night has stayed with me all my life. I can still picture myself in that doorway, looking into that dark little room, trying to understand why every grown-up around me was suddenly afraid of something I couldn't see. Let me tell you about something that happened to me back in late 2021. Because even now, I still can't fully explain it. I was home with my sisters and my little brother, who was about 5 at the time, and everything had felt normal at first. Then my phone suddenly died, even though it still had some battery left, and right after that, my charger quit working too. On its own, that wouldn't have meant much. Annoying, sure, but not scary. What scared me was the feeling that hit me next. Out of nowhere, I felt this awful wave of dread. My heart started pounding, I got nauseous, and I had this deep, unmistakable sense that something was wrong. Not in a dramatic way, just in that quiet, sickening way where your body seems to know something before your mind does. A few minutes later, my little brother asked me to wash some carrots for him, so I went into the kitchen. The sink faced this big front window, and while I was rinsing and cutting them, I happened to glance outside. That's when I saw a car pull into the spot right in front of our house. It looked like the same kind of car my stepdad drove, so at first I didn't think anything of it. But then I looked closer. There was a woman sitting in the driver's seat, and she looked exactly like my mom. I don't mean vaguely similar, I mean exact. Same face, same hair, same little birthmark, same sunglasses, same way of carrying herself. But there was something deeply wrong about it, because she didn't look like my mom as she was then. She looked like a younger version of her, like she'd stepped straight out of an old photo from her early 20s. The makeup, the clothes, even the hairstyle felt like they belonged to another time. And I knew my mom was supposed to be at work. She never wore makeup there, never dressed like that anymore, and none of it made sense. She just sat there with the engine running, looking straight at me through the window. Not at my brother, not around the yard, just at me. And she had this small smile on her face that didn't feel friendly at all. It felt wrong, cold, like she knew I could see that something wasn't right. She stayed there for what felt like forever, though it was probably only a couple of minutes. My little brother got excited and started calling out, "Mom!" He ran toward the front door like he wanted to go greet her. The moment he did that, she finally looked away, faced forward, and drove off like nothing had happened. Calmly, smoothly, no rush at all. And after the car pulled away, I noticed dark tire marks left on the street stretching down the block. I remember feeling sick immediately. I begged my sisters to call my mom. They'd been busy with homework and hadn't paid attention when I tried to get them to look outside, so only my brother and I had actually seen her, or seen it. When we finally got my mom on the phone, she told us she had never left work. And later, when she came home, she was in a completely different car, wearing her normal work clothes, no makeup, looking exactly like herself. People tried to explain it away. They said maybe it was a relative, maybe someone who just resembled her. Maybe my mom was somehow joking around. But none of that fit. Her family lived far away. Nobody looked that much like her. And even if by some impossible chance someone did, why would they pull up to my house, stare directly at me, smile like that, and then leave? It didn't feel random. It felt deliberate. I froze. I didn't want to open the door. The sound kept going for what felt like 2 full minutes. Then my little brother opened his bedroom door, and the noise stopped instantly. He told me he'd heard it too. My sister had heard it too. But when we checked, nobody was there. That's the part that stays with me. Not just seeing something strange, but that same warning feeling showing up first, like my body recognized something before I could. I've had people tell me I was tired, or imagining things, or just letting fear get to me. But I know what I felt. I was fully awake. It was the middle of the day when I saw that car. I don't drink, I don't do drugs, and I'm not someone who goes looking for creepy experiences. I'm actually a pretty grounded person. But I still think about that woman in the car, or whatever it was. Because if it wasn't my mother, then what was it? And why did it look at me like it knew exactly what it was doing? I've kept this to myself for years. And even now it feels strange saying it out loud to another person. From the outside, my life looks steady, ordinary, even lucky. I'm married, I have 2 children, a solid career, a kind partner, and a comfortable home here in Europe. I even have an old motorcycle I care for like it's part of the family. Riding it clears my head. It's one of the things that still makes me feel like myself. But there's something I've never been able to explain. And honestly, I've never stopped carrying it with me. This happened around 2012, maybe early 2013. At the time, I was finishing my bachelor's thesis at a local university. Money was tight, so I worked a morning delivery route in my town, dropping off newspapers before sunrise. I actually liked it more than most people would expect. The streets were quiet, the air was cold and clean, and biking from house to house felt like a good way to start the day. It was peaceful in its own way. Then one morning, that peace was just gone. I was delivering a paper to a house I'd been to dozens of times before when I caught something in the corner of my eye. There was this sudden flash near the front steps, pale blue, almost like lightning but more concentrated, and then something small seemed to lift off or dart away. I remember thinking it looked like a glowing sphere, no bigger than a ball you could hold in one hand. It happened so fast I doubted myself immediately. I told myself I was tired, that my eyes were playing tricks on me, and I kept moving. But once I stepped back down the path and reached the edge of the street, I saw it again. Another bluish flicker came from my right. I turned, and under the street lamp across the road stood a figure. I still don't know how to describe it properly. It looked humanoid, yes, but darker than anything I had ever seen. Not just shadow dark, not like a person wearing black clothes. It looked like a gap in the world, like something had been cut out of reality and left standing there. At first, I wasn't even scared. I was too confused. My mind just couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. Then it moved. That was when the fear hit me. The whole area around me seemed to change the moment it started coming closer. The air felt wrong, heavy, pressurized, like my body knew something was off before my mind caught up. I froze where I stood. I mean, completely froze. And the way it moved was the worst part. It didn't walk normally. It jerked and shifted in these sharp, unnatural bursts, zigzagging from one spot to another so quickly it barely seemed connected to space the way normal things are. As it came nearer, I could make out more of it, and that only made it worse. It was shaped like a person, but featureless, just this impossible black form. And it wasn't alone. There was something with it, lower to the ground, shaped a bit like a dog. I remember, absurdly, that it trotted toward a low garden wall and lifted its leg on it, like the most ordinary animal in the world. That detail stuck with me because it made the whole thing somehow even more horrifying. It was surreal and normal at the same time. Everything in me was screaming to run, but for a few seconds I couldn't do anything at all. I have never felt fear like that before or since. It wasn't just panic. It was total, overwhelming terror, the kind that sinks into your bones. She didn't laugh. She didn't brush it off. She just listened, calmly, kindly, and stayed with me while I tried to explain something I still don't fully understand. And that's the truth of it. I've had a good life, a full life, but there's a part of me that never really left that dark street in the early morning, standing under those lamps, staring at something I still can't explain. I want to tell you about something that's been weighing on me, because the more I think about it, the harder it is to brush off. For years, I had this cheap, mass-produced dream catcher hanging over my bed. I bought it a long time ago, and even though I never really liked how fake it looked, I left it there out of habit. As a native person, I've always wished I had one that was actually made with care, by real hands, with real meaning behind it. Something authentic. Something that carried the kind of protection it's meant to. A little while ago, I finally moved that old dream catcher to a different wall because I was tired of looking at it. Not long after that, I started having dreams that left me feeling uneasy. I couldn't hold on to the details when I woke up, but I always had that same heavy, unsettled feeling, like something was off. Then one night, things got worse. I was having what felt like an ordinary dream, and then I started hearing this faint static somewhere in the background. At first, it was easy to ignore, but it kept getting louder and louder until it swallowed everything else. I remember feeling irritated by it, even in the dream, and then, suddenly, it was like I was aware of my body in bed. I was flat on my back, completely stuck. I couldn't open my eyes, I couldn't move, and the static was so loud it felt unbearable. And with that came this awful wave of fear, just pure dread. I had this intense feeling that someone was hovering over me, leaning in close. You know that feeling people describe in sleep paralysis stories, where there's a presence right above them? It felt exactly like that. When I finally managed to force my eyes open, I woke up again. But this time, I was on my stomach. That part still bothers me. The reason this scares me so much is because it doesn't feel like an isolated thing. Something strange happened years ago too, back when I was in middle school. My best friend Mariah was over at the house. We were in the playroom, and I was sitting in my sensory swing while she pushed me. Out of nowhere, she leaned forward and said, "Yeah?" Like she was answering someone. When I asked her what she was doing, she told me she thought she heard my mom call her name. But my mom wasn't home. No one was. Then, more recently, Mariah and I were on FaceTime, and she paused and asked if my mom had just said my name. I was home alone that time too. And it's not only been us. My stepdad has said that something has jolted him awake before, like he was physically shoved. For as long as I can remember, I've also heard light footsteps or pattering upstairs when the house was empty. I used to blame it on the dog, but even after the dog moved out to live with my dad, the sounds kept happening. It became one of those things I stopped reacting to because it happened so often. But now I keep wondering if I ignored something I shouldn't have. When I lay it all out, it goes like this. First, the pattering sounds. Then my friend hearing my mom's voice. Then I moved the dream catcher. After that, my stepdad got shoved awake. Then the FaceTime thing happened. What makes all of this even stranger is that this house isn't old at all. It's a newer house in a quiet, gated neighborhood, and my family had it built. As far as I know, there's no history here that would explain any of this. No tragedies, no stories, nothing like that. I just know that lately, it feels harder to explain away. I want to tell you about something that happened when I was younger, and even now, thinking about it still makes my skin crawl. Back then, I shared a tiny bedroom with my sister Lena. The room was barely bigger than a closet, maybe 6 square meters at most. We had just enough space for a bed, a wardrobe, and a little desk. Our bed was tucked into one corner, and the door sat across from us in the opposite corner. Every night, we slept with the main light off and only a small night lamp glowing near the door. At the time, I used to struggle a lot with my mental health, and because of that, sleep paralysis happened to me pretty often. Usually, it was the same pattern. I would be half awake, unable to move, while my mind filled with disturbing, chaotic images. It was terrifying, but familiar in a strange way. Then one night, it changed. I remember being fully awake. I was not drowsy, not confused. I could see the room clearly. And then, all at once, my body locked up. I could not move a single muscle. Fear hit me instantly, and that was when I saw it. There was a figure standing out in the dark hallway beyond my bedroom door. It looked human, but not fully solid, more like a shifting mass of shadow. Its eyes glowed a deep, unnatural red. I just lay there, frozen, staring at it while it stared back. It felt endless. Maybe half an hour passed before it finally faded away, and only then could I move again. After that, it kept happening. Night after night, I would wake up trapped in my own body, and each time, that thing was a little closer. First it stood in the hallway, then beside the doorway, then in the doorway itself, then a few steps inside the room, moving nearer and nearer to my bed. Eventually, I could not take it anymore. I made up an excuse and told my parents I wanted to sleep in their room. Our house was narrow and stretched out in a straight line, with each room connected by a slim hallway. From the front, there was the living room, then my parents' room, then the kitchen, then mine, and finally the bathroom at the end. That night, I lay on the outer edge of my parents' bed, only a short reach from the door, with my back turned toward it. Sometime in the night, I heard the sound of the metal door opening. From the corner of my eye, I saw a figure leaning into the room. I felt it looking at me. For a moment, I honestly thought someone had broken into the house. I kept perfectly still and pretended to be asleep. I do not know how long it stood there, but eventually, it pulled back and closed the door again. Then I heard footsteps moving away, but not toward the living room. They were heading in the direction of my bedroom. Once everything went quiet, I slipped out of bed and checked the front of the house. The door was still locked. Nothing looked disturbed. I went to the kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife I could find, and walked slowly down the hallway. No one was there. My sister was asleep in our room. The bathroom was empty. There was no sign that anyone had entered the house at all. That was when I realized I had seen it again. The next night, I went back to my own room. This time, the figure came right up to the bed. It stopped less than a foot from my legs. Like always, it did nothing but stare. It stayed there for a long time, then vanished. The night after that was my last one in that house before leaving for college in another city. That night, it got into bed with me. I still do not know how to explain that image properly. It climbed onto the mattress on its hands and knees, like a person crawling into bed, and then just stayed there, motionless, facing me, watching me. The next morning, I left. Then yesterday, she finally told me why. She said she had never experienced sleep paralysis before, never seen anything strange. But on the very first night after I moved out, she woke up unable to move and saw a woman standing right beside her bed. Since that night, the bedroom lights have never been turned off again. I want to tell you about a place I worked years ago because, even now, I still think about it more than I'd like to. For almost 3 years, I worked for a forestry office that operated out of an old farmhouse in a rural area near the state line. The house was well over 2 centuries old, and you could feel that the second you stepped inside. It had wide pine floorboards, old fireplaces in several rooms, a dirt-packed basement, and one tiny bathroom that looked like it had been added sometime in the middle of the last century. The whole place felt worn in, like it had absorbed every life that had passed through it. From the beginning, I never felt alone there. That feeling would start the moment I came in each morning. It was like the house noticed you. Sometimes there were strange smells drifting through the rooms for no reason at all. Once in a while, it was something soft and almost comforting, like citrus or rose perfume. Other times it was sour and rotten, even when there was no trash, no spoiled food, nothing that could explain it. There was a kitchen downstairs, and more than once we came in to find all the cabinet doors closed, only to hear them suddenly swinging open while no one was in the room. I'd be upstairs working, hear the noise, head down the back staircase, and every cabinet door would be standing wide open like someone had gone through them all at once. One of the women I worked with had her own way of handling it. If she arrived first, she'd call out, cheerful as could be, "Good morning, everybody." And when the noises upstairs got too bold, she'd speak straight into the silence and tell whatever was there to leave her alone. Funny thing is, sometimes it actually worked. Human beings, as always, negotiating office politics with the dead. The first time I actually saw something with my own eyes happened during a meeting day. I'd gone upstairs to grab something from my bag, and my back was turned to the hallway when I heard footsteps rushing past me. I spun around and saw 2 shadowy figures, one smaller than the other, dart down the hall and disappear into a room at the back. I heard the footsteps the whole way. It wasn't a vague feeling. It was there, and then it was gone. Another day, just the secretary and I were in the building on a freezing morning. The heat had gone out again, which that furnace seemed to treat as a hobby, so we were downstairs huddled near a space heater trying to stay warm. Out of nowhere, we heard heavy boots running from the front part of the house, up the staircase, and across the floor directly over our heads. Loud, fast, deliberate. We both froze and looked at each other. but by then we were so used to the place acting up that all we could really do was wait for it to pass. Even the cleaning staff didn't last. We had a cleaner who worked evenings after we left, and he started writing in the office log that he kept hearing someone call his name while he was vacuuming. Every time he shut the vacuum off, the house would go completely quiet. One night, he decided to knock on the wall to see if something would answer. At first, nothing. Then he tried a little rhythm, and the wall knocked back. He quit not long after that. Sensible man, honestly. My supervisor had a habit of staying late, though never too late after a while. She told me that one evening, while she was alone at her desk facing the hallway, she saw a very tall shadow figure move slowly past her doorway. Not fast like the ones I saw. Slow, calm, watching. Another time, she saw a glowing blue orb, about the size of a ball, moving down the hall with this strange electric energy around it before it slammed into a metal filing cabinet at the end. She was working in one of the larger rooms, the one we all believed had once been the family dining room, and she looked up to see a man standing there. Dark hair, serious face, maybe in his 40s, dressed in clothing that looked straight out of the 19th century. She said he looked just as startled to see her as she was to see him. Light passed through him. Then he turned toward the stairs and disappeared. Not long after that, I was walking through that same room when I heard a woman's voice in my mind, clear and sharp, saying, "This is my house." And I know how that sounds. Trust me, I do. But after learning more about the land, it stayed with me. The property had changed hands more than once because of state projects and land purchases over the years. Families had been pushed off, land had been repurposed, and the house had outlasted nearly everyone who ever tried to claim it. So when I heard that, it didn't feel theatrical. It felt angry, personal. At one point, I started leaving a recorder running overnight in different parts of the house. Two areas gave me the most activity. The oldest downstairs room, which had once been a family sitting room, and the little upstairs rooms that had probably been servants' quarters, one of which was my office. When I listened back to the recordings from the downstairs room, I sometimes heard faint piano music, clear enough to recognize, soft and distant, but unmistakably there, classical pieces. That same room would also fill, for no reason, with the scent of fresh pine. But not everything on those recordings was gentle. There was also a rough male voice I could never quite make out, and more than once, I heard what sounded like children crying. The words were never fully clear, but it often sounded like one of them was calling for their mother. That part stayed with me more than anything else. You can brush off a lot of strange things, but hearing sorrow like that settles somewhere deep. I ended up doing research at the local records office, going through old deeds, wills, property transfers, handwritten documents from generations back. I traced the families who had lived there and eventually found a living relative connected to one of them, an elderly woman who had visited the house often as a child in the 1930s. I invited her to see it again, and she came. She remembered the house beautifully. I asked her where the family used to put their Christmas tree, and she pointed to the same old room where I had recorded the piano music. Then I carefully asked whether one of her relatives, an unmarried uncle who had lived there years ago, had played piano. She smiled and said he had, and that he played wonderfully. That didn't explain everything, not even close, but it explained enough to make the hair rise on the back of my neck. Things kept happening after that. Contractors complained that tools vanished and turned up in places they never would have left them. Visitors had experiences of their own. One woman used the bathroom and swore the closet door in front of her started shaking violently, with the knob rattling like something on the other side was trying to get out. She came out terrified. A lot of it felt mischievous more than cruel. Not all of it, but much of it. Like the house was full of people who didn't appreciate being ignored. A few years later, funding was cut, and I left for another job. Not long after that, the office itself was shut down, and the farmhouse was left empty. It's still there, though. Every now and then, when I'm out riding the trails or passing near the canal, I catch sight of it again. And every single time, I look at those windows and get the same feeling I used to get when I worked there, like something inside still remembers me. Hello, Paranormal M channel viewers. After a long day, this is my favorite moment, sitting down at the mic and sharing paranormal experiences with you. Thank you so much for sending in your stories, and please don't hesitate to send more. I still read every single comment, and I truly appreciate your continued support. Please subscribe and turn on notifications as well. Now, let's get into today's paranormal stories. So, I've never really known what to call it. A ghost, a demon, something in between. Some kind of presence that's been hanging around my family for years, like it pays rent. Let me back up a little so this makes sense. I'm the middle kid. My older brother, Declan, is the one who gave it a name, because that's what he does when something freaks him out. He jokes first and panics later. He started calling it Mason. My little brother is Eli, and he's the kind of kid who wouldn't hurt a fly. That matters later. We've moved a lot, not because we want to, but because it's hard to find places where you aren't getting screwed over somehow. We've always had food and a roof, but it's been unstable. And honestly, sometimes it felt like this thing followed us. Like it didn't care what house we were in, it cared who we were. The first time I remember noticing it, I was about 5 or 6. I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, and I kept seeing these shadows in my room. Not normal, a car passed outside shadows. These were wrong. They didn't match the light. They moved like they had their own intentions. And when you're that little, you don't have words for it. You just know your stomach is cold and your skin feels too tight. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But then my parents started having their own experiences, completely separate from mine. Stuff they wouldn't normally admit out loud, especially my dad, because he tries so hard to be the nothing scares me type. Over time, it stopped being subtle. We'd hear heavy footsteps in the hallway when everyone was sitting in the same room. Cabinets would be open when we knew they were closed. There'd be knocks, like someone rapping on the wall with their knuckles, slow and deliberate, like it wanted us to answer. And the TV, this one still messes with me. We'd set it on one channel, and it would just switch. Not glitch out, switch. Like somebody had a remote we couldn't see. Then there's my mom. My mom has been through a lot physically. A while back, she hurt her foot badly and ended up on crutches. And I swear to you, this is the part that made it hard to keep pretending it was just weird noises. One night, she got thrown. Not stumbled, not tripped, thrown, like something shoved her with force. She went flying back a scary distance, like several feet, and she screamed in a way I've never heard before. The only people nearby were me and Eli, and I believed him immediately when he said it wasn't him. He's not violent. He's not even the type to slam doors when he's mad. After that, things got darker. There are these periods where my mom gets sick, like exhausted, shaky, nauseous, the kind of sick that drains her. And every time that happens, Mason gets more active. It's like it notices when she's weak, like it's feeding off her being run down. My mom started getting scratches too. Not like I bumped into something scratches. These looked like thin lines, clustered, angry, like someone dragged nails across her skin. Seeing that on your own mom, it does something to you. It makes you feel helpless in a way that sticks in your chest. And the sounds. God, the sounds. We've heard voices that don't belong to anyone in the house. Low murmuring sometimes, like it's just out of reach. Once, there was a growl. This deep, aggressive, chest-rattling growl that did not sound like our dogs. It was louder than any animal we have, and it had this intention behind it, like a warning. Even our pets started acting different. There was one place we lived where the layout didn't even make sense for what we were hearing. The living room ceiling was directly under this tiny upstairs area, barely anything up there. But one night, me and Declan both heard footsteps above us. Heavy steps, back and forth, like someone pacing. We looked at each other like, "You heard that too, right?" And then, at another house, Eli started seeing a man. Not a clear face, not clothes, nothing he could describe well, just the shape of a man. And it scared him so badly, he wouldn't walk through certain rooms alone. He'd cling to us like he was trying to crawl into our ribs for safety. And that's when it really hit me. This wasn't just my imagination as a kid. This wasn't just stress. Something was happening. My mom also managed to take a picture once. Something weird showed up in it. She wouldn't explain it much, just said, "I got it. I got something." And I could tell by her voice she didn't feel triumphant. She sounded shaken. Now my parents are putting up cameras. Not even in a dramatic way, just tired. Like, we need proof because we're not crazy. Because lately it's been more active than ever, especially when my mom's health dips. And here's the honest truth. I don't know what it is, but it feels like something that knows us, something that watches and waits and moves closer when it senses weakness. And I hate that we even gave it a name, because sometimes I wonder if that made it more real. Still, when you live with something long enough, you start talking about it like it's a horrible neighbor you can't evict. So yeah, that's Mason. And I really, really hope the cameras catch something, because part of me wants proof. And part of me is terrified of what we'll see if we get it. So, this morning I woke up to someone calling my name. Like, actually calling it. Clear enough that my body reacted before my brain even caught up. It was a familiar voice, too. It sounded like Diana, the woman who usually comes by to help take care of my mom. She's here a lot, so the sound of her voice doesn't feel strange in itself. Except for one detail. Today isn't one of her days. So before I even opened my eyes, I had that half-asleep confusion where you're trying to assemble reality out of fog. Like, did I sleep through something? Did she come early? Did I miss an appointment? I sat straight up in bed, heart already doing that small, uneasy sprint. And I'll be honest, my first thought wasn't ghost. My first thought was, what is going on with me? Because over the past year, I've had something else happening too. Knocking. It's almost always 3 knocks. Not during the day, not when I'm wide awake and busy, always at night. Usually when I'm drifting off, or hovering in that weird in-between space of waking up. Sometimes it's so real I'll hold my breath and wait for it to happen again. And here's the thing, I'm in my late 40s now, and I've noticed little changes. Nothing dramatic, but things like forgetting a word for a second or walking into a room and blanking on why. Normal aging stuff, but enough that it makes me wonder if these experiences are neurological. Like, maybe my brain is misfiring during sleep transitions. Except, there are pieces of this that make it hard to keep it neatly in the "it's just me" box. I rent the whole house from my closest friend, Marissa. Last year, she lost her husband, Evan. It hit her in a way that still sits heavy in the room when she talks about him. Right after he passed, she spent a while staying with me here. And one day, she told me something that made my skin go cold. She said one night she woke up in the guest bedroom, the same bedroom I usually sleep in, because she heard a voice calling her name. And she wasn't vague about it. She didn't say, "It sounded like someone," or "maybe I imagined it." She said she knew it was Evan. And the way she described it, quiet, stunned, almost embarrassed to admit it, made it worse. Like she wasn't trying to convince me. She was just shaken all over again by the memory. Then there's my mom. My mom lives with me, and when she first moved in, there were a couple incidents I tried really hard to explain away. I told myself it could be stress, sleep disruption, maybe her mind doing strange things in the night. She's had anxiety, and I've worried about early cognitive decline before, so I had a whole file of reasonable explanations ready to use. But one night, she woke up yelling, full panic in her voice. When I ran to her room, she was sitting up, trembling, and she said someone had been calling her name. She kept repeating that it was crystal clear, and she looked at me like she didn't recognize her own house. A few weeks later, early morning, we were both just waking up. I walked into her room and she asked me, "Who was here?" I said, "What do you mean?" And she told me she thought I had gotten up to let someone in because she heard knocking. Again, that sure, certain tone, like she couldn't believe I was even questioning it. I tried to reassure her. "No one was here, Mom." But she actually laughed, this sharp little laugh, and said something like, "I know what I heard. There's no way you didn't hear it too." That stuck with me. Not because it proves anything, just because she wasn't confused in that moment. She wasn't dreamy or disoriented. She was confident. She went quiet for a long time. And when she finally spoke, she said, very softly, "I think so too." I asked her why, and she told me she'd seen a shadowy figure, a tall man, standing in her doorway. She didn't dramatize it. She didn't spin it into a story. She just said it, plain as anything, like she was admitting she'd found mold behind the dresser. And I remember standing there thinking, okay, so now what do I do with that? Because yes, my faith matters to me. Back in 2020, I had a real turning point in my life. After that, I went through a stretch where things felt heightened, like the world had a thinner veil for a while. I had several experiences I couldn't easily explain, one after another. But even with all of that, I've never had this kind of thing. Voices calling names, knocks that repeat, multiple people in the same house describing the same sort of disturbances. So now I'm left in this uncomfortable middle place, where part of me wants a clean medical explanation, and part of me is watching the pattern and thinking, this isn't nothing. And honestly, the hardest part isn't fear in a dramatic sense. It's the quiet uncertainty. That feeling when you wake up and for a second you don't know whether you're alone, whether your mind is playing tricks on you, or whether something else is brushing up against your life. That's where I am right now. Just trying to make sense of it, and trying to decide what I believe about what I'm hearing. So, I want to tell you something that still gives me chills, even now. I'm from India, and this didn't happen directly to me, but it happened to someone very close to my heart. Let's call her Mira. Mira is originally from Odisha, but she grew up mostly in West Bengal, where I live. Her grandparents stayed back in their hometown, and for years, that place was like this warm little anchor for her. Familiar rooms, old stories, the kind of love that feels steady even when life changes. In January 2024, Mira's grandfather passed away. And this is the part she still carries with her, quietly. The day before he died, she was exhausted, just completely drained, and she didn't talk to him. Not properly. Not one last time. Later, she told me it felt like her body gave up right when her heart needed to show up most. Now, you should understand, Mira and her grandpa were incredibly close. Like, soft close. The kind where you don't need big conversations all the time, because love is already sitting in the room with you, And there was this one tiny thing between them that sounds silly until you hear it in context. When Mira was younger, she had this stuffed toy, a little plush bear she adored. It went missing back in 2018, and after that, every time she visited her grandparents, she'd jokingly tell her grandpa, "Okay, you have to find it this time." And he'd always play along, like it was a mission they were both still working on. Her grandmother, though, she's not someone who texts. She speaks Odia, and she doesn't really understand Bengali well. She's also never been comfortable typing, especially not with English letters. All she uses is this old keypad phone, the kind with physical buttons, something her husband used for years before it became hers. She mainly uses it for calls. That's it. Okay, now fast forward to a monsoon evening in July 2024. Mira and her family were traveling to Odisha. They reached their hometown around early evening, maybe a little after 6. Everyone's tired, bags everywhere, that familiar rush of arriving after a long journey. And then Mira notices something. A message. An SMS. It had been sent from her grandmother's keypad phone to her mother's phone, just minutes before they arrived. And the message was written in a way that felt eerily specific, like it was meant for Mira's little brother, and like Mira herself had typed it and sent it. The wording even sounded like her. But here's the impossible part. They weren't there yet. No one had touched that phone. And her grandmother couldn't have written it. Not in Bengali, not like that. Not on an old keypad. It wasn't her style, her language, or her ability. And the message asked about something painfully personal. It asked where the missing plush toy was. That toy, the one from years ago. The thing that only Mira, her grandpa, and maybe a couple family members would even remember. And it gets stranger. Even though the message appeared on the grandmother's phone as sent, Mira's mother never actually received it. No SMS came through. Nothing in her inbox. It was like the message existed in one place only, like a footprint with no person attached to it. Mira tried to make sense of it. Everyone did. But there was no neat explanation that felt right. Then, months passed. And on January 3rd, 2025, something else happened. Mira was supposed to go back to her hometown that day, but plans changed last minute. She stayed back, and she noticed something that made her stomach drop. The message that had been dated July 2024 now showed a different date. It now said it was sent on 3/1/2025, the exact day she was meant to travel, but didn't. And again, just like before, her mother never received anything, no trace of it on her device. It was like the phone had rewritten its own memory. Mira didn't want to spiral into fear, so she tested it. She sent a normal SMS from that same phone, right then and there. That one went through immediately, so the phone could send messages. Just not that one. Not in the way reality usually works. And I remember sitting there when she told me all of this, listening, feeling this heavy quiet in my chest. Because whether it was a glitch or something else, it didn't feel random. It felt like a tug on an old thread, like someone reaching for a shared memory that mattered. Like the kind of thing a grandfather might do, if love could move through wires and time and grief. And I'm not saying that's what it was. I can't prove anything. But I will tell you this. The message wasn't about money, or instructions, or anything practical. It was about a lost childhood toy. A tiny, tender thing that only they would care about. And that's what makes it so hard to dismiss. So yeah, I don't know what it was. A technical error that lined up too perfectly? A strange phone bug that somehow pulled up an old, personal detail? Or something gentler and far harder to explain, like love refusing to fully leave the room. I just know Mira still thinks about it. And honestly, so do I. Okay, so here's the backstory. About a year ago, I moved into this place I keep calling an apartment. But honestly, that word feels generous. It's more like the top half of a house. Like a little add-on unit above a family's place. Kind of a duplex situation. The owners, Marisol and Greg, built this upstairs level years ago for their oldest kid, Tyler. And now I'm the one living up here. And I need you to understand something. The place I lived before this? No joke, it had a whole haunted vibe. Stuff happened there that other people noticed too. Like, I wasn't just imagining things in the dark. So when I was moving in here, that topic came up in conversation, and Tyler just kind of smirked and goes, "Yeah, wait until you stay here." At the time, I laughed. I genuinely thought he was teasing me because I just told him about my last place. But then, about a week after moving in, I'm in bed late, half asleep, not even scrolling or anything, and I start hearing this weird sound, like a soft, rushing, airy, whirling noise. At first I'm thinking, is the wind hitting something? Is there a vent open? It's subtle, but it's steady enough that I can't ignore it. So I get up, walk out into the kitchen, and that's when I see it. My stove's range hood is on. And not like, oh, maybe I bumped it earlier. No, I know I didn't touch it. And this thing isn't one of those easy toggles. There are 4 settings, and you have to actually press the button in with a little force. It's not sensitive. It's not the kind of thing that flicks on if you brush past it. I stood there staring at it like I was waiting for it to explain itself. After that, I didn't have anything else happen for a while, so I tried to let it go. I told myself it was a weird fluke. Maybe an electrical issue. Maybe I was tired. Maybe anything. But then, months later, something new started. And this is the part that's messing with me the most. Every single night, like it's on a timer, at 12:30 a.m., it begins. This tapping, or knocking. Sometimes it sounds like a small bang. It's coming from somewhere around my bedroom. Wall, floor. I can't even pinpoint it because it shifts in the way sound does at night when you're lying there trying to figure out if you're losing it. It continues until morning. Usually around 6 a.m. it fades out. And what's weird is the schedule of it. Like, why would pipes or wood or anything natural be so punctual? It's not random. It starts at 12:30 every night, like clockwork. The worst part is between 3 and 4 a.m. That's when it gets loudest. Like whoever or whatever is doing it decides that's the prime time to really commit. And it doesn't even have a pattern. It's not like tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, pause. It's different every time. Sometimes it's quick, sometimes it's spaced out, sometimes it's like someone is testing different intensities just to see what gets the biggest reaction out of me. It'll go for anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes at a stretch, then stop long enough for me to think, okay, maybe it's done. And then it starts again. So I did what any normal person does. I talked to the owners. But here's the thing. It's gotten more aggressive over time. Not fading, not calming down, getting worse. And it's waking me up over and over again, like multiple times a night, night after night. It's that specific kind of exhaustion where you start dreading bedtime because you already know what's waiting for you at 12:30. And tonight, this is why I'm even telling you this right now. I'm sitting here wide awake at 4:20 a.m. because it woke me up again. I'm not even fully angry anymore. I'm just worn down. I need someone to tell me what this is because I'm out of explanations. I've tried recording it too, and it's almost like it reacts to that. Sometimes the second I reach for my phone, it slows down or stops like it knows. Other times, it does the opposite. It goes completely full force, like it's daring me to catch it. I have clips from tonight, short ones because nobody wants to watch hours of knocking, but I've got enough to prove I'm not making it up. And I'm just sitting here thinking, what is this? Because I can handle a weird one-time range hood incident. I can even brush off the occasional house noise. But something that starts at 12:30 a.m. and knocks through the night like it has a routine? That's not just old house behavior. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. Wide awake, listening, waiting for it to start again. So, I didn't think I'd ever be the kind of person to tell a story like this, but here we are. About 3 years ago, my partner Maya and I moved into this older place. Nothing fancy, just a solid, lived-in house with creaky bones and a history we didn't really think about. It's around 30-something years old, and when we bought it, we joked about how it probably had character. You know, the kind you laugh at while you're still unpacking boxes. Anyway, a few nights ago, Maya sat me down and said, "I need to tell you something, and I don't want you to brush it off." And the way she said it, her voice all careful and tight, I knew it wasn't going to be about a leaky pipe or a weird smell. She told me that ever since we moved in, she's been hearing things. At first, it was small enough that she didn't even mention it. Just the occasional thump from the attic, like a heavy step or something shifting. She'd grab the flashlight, climb up, check the hatch. Nothing. No raccoons, no loose boards, no explanation. The house would just sit there like it hadn't done anything at all. But over the last couple months, it's changed. Not just more often, but bolder. Like whatever it is has stopped being subtle. She said she's heard the stairs do this thing, 2 or 3 solid steps in a row. Not the soft settling creaks, not the usual house noise rhythm. She described it like someone deliberately stomping just enough to make sure she noticed. Like, "Hey, I'm here." Another time, she was sitting on the couch scrolling on her phone, and she heard a sigh. A real one. Close, like within a couple steps. Not a draft, not the TV, not the fridge doing its little hum and click thing. A full, tired, human-sounding sigh. And then the attic again. Always the attic again. She'd tried to rationalize it, she said. Tried to tell herself it was pipes, or the roof cooling, or the wind. But the problem is, it doesn't feel random to her. It feels intentional, like it's reacting to her being alone. And then she told me the detail that made my stomach drop. She said she only hears these things when I'm either asleep or not home. Not usually. Not, "I think so." She said it's a pattern she's noticed so clearly that she can almost predict it now. If I'm out running errands or I've gone to bed early and she's still up, that's when the thumps happen. That's when the footsteps happen. That's when the sigh happens. But if I'm home and awake, nothing. Silence. Normal house. And I have to be honest, I've never experienced any of it here. Not once. Which makes it worse in a weird way, because it's not like we're both hearing the same thing and going, "Okay, this is strange." It's like the house has picked one person to speak to, and it's not me. Maya isn't dramatic. She's not the kind of person who turns every little sound into a ghost story. She's the one who calms me down when I overthink things. So when she was telling me this and her hands started shaking, and she actually broke down, crying, trying to explain it without sounding crazy, that's what got me. It's doing something to her. It's wearing her down. So I just sat there listening, feeling completely useless. Because what do you even say? Maybe it's the house settling. When she's describing something that sounds like a person making sure she feels watched. And the thing she kept coming back to was the same question. Like it's waiting for the house to be quieter. Like it wants privacy. Now, here's the part that makes me feel even weirder admitting all this. I don't have Maya's experiences, but I do have this recurring nightmare. It happens every few months, not often enough to call it constant, but often enough that it sticks with me like a bruise. In the dream, there's this presence, not a person, more like an absence shaped like something. Just thick darkness, like a mass or an energy, and it's chasing me. Sometimes it's chasing me, sometimes it's coming after people I love. And I'm always trying to say prayers or recite something sacred, something I grew up believing had power. But in the dream, I can't. It's like my mouth won't work right, or I can't remember the words, or my voice is trapped in my throat. And I'm running, and I'm panicking, and the darkness is closing in like it's patient, like it already knows I'm not going to be able to stop it. And every time, right when it gets close enough that I feel this cold, final kind of dread, I wake up. Heart pounding, breath sharp, that awful feeling like you've been hunted. It could be just a dream, stress, random brain nonsense, I know that. But when Maya told me what she's been hearing, how it seems to show up only when I'm not really present, I felt something in my chest go tight. Because now there's this thought I can't shake. What if it isn't random? What if something in this house has learned when it can get through? And if it really is something, what does it want with her? Why her? Why only when she's alone? I don't know. I honestly don't. I just know that the way she looked when she finally told me, like she'd been carrying it by herself for too long, made me feel cold all over. And since that night, I've been listening to the house differently. Not for a ghost, just for anything that sounds like it knows when I'm not paying attention. Okay, so I need you to hear me out, because if I say this out loud to the wrong person, I'm pretty sure they'll smile politely and start backing away. I've always believed in the paranormal, not in a every creak is a ghost kind of way, but more like, I think there are reasons things happen. In my head, it's usually one of two things: pain that clings to a place, or something dark that got invited in. Like human spirits stick around because something awful happened, or because they want something finished. And the truly evil stuff? I've always believed it needs a door opened for it. By people, by choices, by invitation. That's why I've always felt safe at home. This house has been my whole life. I'm an adult now, still living in the same home in the southern US. The kind of place where you know every groan of the wood and every little click the HVAC makes in winter. It's always been my family's house. No weird history, no we found old bones in the walls, nothing like that. And we're a faith-heavy household. I used to think that mattered. The only time I ever felt real fear in this house was the normal kind. Like when you're a kid and you watch something scary, and then convince yourself there's a hand waiting to grab your ankle from under the bed. But this past month has taken my sense of reality and shaken it like a soda can. So, late December, I went to visit family for Christmas, and when we got back, it was right before New Year's. I immediately went into a stretch of night shifts until about January 4th. So I'd come home while the sun was coming up, sleep during the day, and just kind of exist in that upside-down haze. Then I switched back to my normal day schedule, and I haven't slept a normal night since. The first night back in my room, I felt sick, like genuinely nauseous, and I could not shake this feeling that someone was watching me. Now listen, I'm not dramatic. I'm not jumpy. I'm not somebody who spirals over a vibe. I knew my doors were locked. I knew my windows were covered. I knew there was no physical way someone could be staring at me through anything. And still, my body didn't care what my brain knew. My heart was pounding like I'd just sprinted, and I'm lying there in the dark thinking, Why do I feel like I'm being hunted? I ended up turning my lamp on and reading just to avoid closing my eyes. I think I got maybe an hour of sleep after sunrise, and then I went to work. Next night, same thing. That same awful watched feeling. Stomach turning, skin prickling, heart doing cartwheels in my chest. This time I got paranoid in a different direction because, honestly, I'm more scared of a living person than any ghost story. I turned off anything that made noise and sat completely still, just listening. Like if someone had broken in, I wanted to hear them coming. I wanted footsteps. I wanted some kind of proof I wasn't losing it. But there was nothing, just silence, and that feeling, like an audience I couldn't see. That went on for days. A full week of almost no sleep and constant dread. And the part that freaked me out the most was how unlike me it was. I'm not an anxious person. I don't do panic attacks. I don't do irrational fear. Then came January 12th. By then, I'd almost adjusted to my broken sleep schedule. Not in a healthy way. More like my body gave up arguing with me. It was around 1 in the morning. Whole house asleep. I'm in bed reading when I hear footsteps. 3 distinct steps on the roof above the garage, right near the side of my windows. And at first I'm like, okay, critters. Because yeah, sometimes you get squirrels up there, sometimes a raccoon. Normal. Then it gets quiet. A full minute. And then the footsteps come back. Heavy, deliberate, in a straight line across the roof. Not scampering, not claws, not a random little patter. It sounded like a person wearing work boots, like thick soles, like someone walking with intent. I froze so hard I felt my spine lock. I could hear it through the wall and through the window, steps moving toward the part of the roof closest to my room, and then stopping. Quiet again. I tried to talk myself down. I remember whispering, "It's a big raccoon." Like if I said it enough times, it would become true. And then, tapping, right at the center of my window. Not a scrape, not wind, not something brushing. Taps, like a knuckle, like a fingernail, like someone politely asking to be let in. And the center of the window is too far to reach from that roof. There's nothing under it. No tree, no awning, nothing. The tapping went on and off for almost an hour. And I want you to understand, my brain was running 2 movies at the same time. One was true crime. Someone is out there. Someone is trying to get in. Someone knows you're awake. The other was every ghost story I've ever heard. Don't open it. Don't acknowledge it. Don't invite it. I did not move. I didn't peek. I didn't pull the curtain. I didn't even breathe right. I sat there with my book open and my heart thumping so hard I thought it might shake the bed. Eventually the tapping stopped, and then the footsteps started again, dragging and shifting across the roof like whoever it was moving away, climbing higher, circling the edge, disappearing toward the far side of the house. Then, after a long, quiet stretch, one final stomp. Heavy, deliberate, like punctuation. Morning came, and I texted my stepdad, his name is Marcus, to check the security cameras when he woke up. Nothing. Not a shadow. Not a flicker. Not a single pixel of evidence. After that night, I didn't sleep with my guard down. I spent the next week basically glued to my legal protection like it was a stuffed animal. The roof noises didn't come back, but something else started. Dragging sounds from the garage attic. The best way I can describe it is like someone's moving heavy boxes, like shuffling, rolling, sliding something across a floor. And it wasn't quick. It would go on and on. From around 11 at night until just before dawn, off and on like whatever was up there was busy. I tried recording it because I needed proof, but my phone microphone barely caught it, like it was embarrassed for me. In person, it was loud enough to make my jaw clench. My family started saying it was sleep deprivation, auditory hallucinations, stress. You're overtired, Leah. That kind of thing. Like if they made it medical enough, it would stop being scary. Marcus even went up there and added heavier insulation to muffle anything I might be hearing. But it didn't stop. And that feeling, being watched, never left. One night, my ceiling vent cracked loud enough to make me jump, like it shifted or popped in a way it never had before. Later on, it turned on automatically, and this scent came through. Cologne. Not ours. Not familiar. Not like laundry detergent or some leftover smell from the house. Cologne. It was coming from the vent. And in the last 5 days, the house started making noise during the day too. That used to be my safe zone. If I could make it to sunrise, I could finally sleep. I could shower alone, eat something, pretend I wasn't unraveling. But now, things creak in places they never creaked before. The vent moans sometimes, like the metal is flexing and groaning, long and low. The wood floor outside my bedroom cracks like someone heavy is standing out there. But when I look under the door, there's no shadow. And the weirdest part? The noises almost always happen on the opposite floor from wherever I am. If I'm upstairs, I hear it downstairs. If I'm downstairs, it's above me, like it's staying just out of sight on purpose. Then tonight, this is what finally pushed me into telling anyone, even you. I was downstairs in the living room, alone, quiet, and I heard something fall directly above me. There's an upstairs common area up there, and my cat, his name is Doodle, likes to hop on and off furniture. So I tried to tell myself it was him, but I couldn't take the chance. I was too wound up, too tired, too sure something was playing with me. So I grabbed a kitchen knife, because I guess that's who I am now, and I went up the stairs. Everything upstairs was exactly where it should be. Nothing knocked over. Nothing fallen. No mess. No obvious source. And Doodle? He was in the same chair he'd been in earlier. He hadn't moved. So whatever I heard wasn't him. And then all the creaking started focusing in one spot. There's a room up there we call the storm closet. It's basically a storage room, big enough to feel like a small basement, tucked into a part of the house that never became a bedroom. The door is right off the upstairs common area, and the noises started coming from inside that room. Rapid creaks, quick shifts, like someone standing up fast, like weight moving on the other side of the door. And right after that, the vents overhead made that same long moaning sound, the one they do in my bedroom. I stood there holding a knife, staring at that door, and I'm telling you, I have never wanted to be brave less in my entire life. I did not open it. I stepped back, like the world's worst horror movie character who finally learned something, and God, I can't believe I did this. I held the knife up toward the door and the vent like I was warning the house. Then I went downstairs. It's been about an hour. I'm on the couch now, still listening, and I can hear footsteps above me again. Clear, measured, like someone walking around. Doodle is with me now, pressed against my leg like he knows I'm not okay, but he's not freaking out. The dog isn't losing it either. None of my animals are doing that stereotypical, there's a ghost thing people talk about. So here's where I'm stuck. Is this a spirit? Or is this a person? Because I like true crime, I know about people hiding in houses. I know about the kinds of things mentally unwell people do when they latch onto someone. And that scares me in a very real, practical way. But I also love ghost stories. And I know how they start. Small, subtle, escalating. A feeling, a sound, a pattern. I'm exhausted. I'm terrified. And I've never felt so alone in my own house. because nobody else is experiencing it. Nobody else believes it's real the way it's real to me. And even if it stopped tomorrow, if everything went quiet and peaceful, I don't know if I could sleep anyway, because now I'm afraid of what happens when I finally let my guard down. So tell me, do I call the police or do I call my psychiatrist? Because right now it feels like those are my only options, and I'm desperate enough to pick any of them. So this all kicked off a few months ago, back when I was still living in our old place with my boyfriend. Well, now he's my fiancé, Evan. But at the time we were just doing our normal routine. Nothing dramatic, just sleep, work, repeat. And I need to say up front, I've dealt with sleep paralysis before. Enough times that I can usually tell when it's about to happen, like there's this shift in the air. My body gets heavy, and this awful feeling creeps in, like I'm not alone, like something's standing nearby, watching me, waiting for me to notice. Usually when it hits, it's a whole fight to wake up. I'm stuck there, trying to move a finger, trying to force a breath, trying to yank myself out of it. But that night was different. I felt the paralysis start, same dread, same pressure, but I snapped awake so easily it almost didn't make sense. Like someone flipped a switch and I was just up, sitting upright in bed, heart already thumping. We sleep with the closet door cracked open, always have. I don't even know why, habit I guess. So I sit up and my eyes go straight to the closet. And I swear to you, standing there in the doorway was my dad. Except, not my dad. He looked like him, in the way a nightmare can look like someone you love. But his skin was ruined, charred, like he'd been through something unspeakable. Not just burned, cooked. And there were these faint, angry orange glows underneath, like embers showing through splits in the skin. It reminded me of those horror game creatures that look human until you notice they're basically walking ash. And the worst part wasn't even what he looked like. It was that he didn't move. Not even a little. No breathing, no shifting weight, no blink, just standing there, perfectly still, like he was placed in the doorway and forgotten. My brain tried to be reasonable. My dad works around industrial heat. He's a furnace tech. He's told me stories that make my stomach turn. Guys getting hurt, near misses, things you don't unsee. So I told myself, okay, subconscious. Stress, sleep paralysis doing what it does. So I blink hard. I rub my eyes. I stare again. Still there. I was wide awake. I could feel the sheets. I could hear the faint hum of the apartment. Evan was breathing beside me. And that thing, wearing my dad's shape, just stood there. I don't know how to explain what happened next without sounding insane, but I think my mind chose survival over logic. I just laid back down. Like if I didn't acknowledge it, it would stop being real. I turned my face toward the pillow, pulled the blanket up, and somehow, I fell asleep again. I woke up the next morning and told myself it was over. It wasn't. About 2 weeks later, I wake up to my phone blowing up. Texts from my mom, frantic. Like, all caps frantic. She's like, "Are you okay? Please answer." So I'm half asleep, squinting at the screen, and I text back, "Yeah, I'm fine. What's going on?" And she tells me this. That morning, she heard my voice at their back door. Not a knock, not footsteps. My voice, saying, "Mom," over and over and over again. Just, "Mom, Mom, Mom." And I'm sitting there reading this, and my skin goes cold, because I'm thinking, no way. So I ask her, what did I sound like? Not scared, not crying, not urgent, just calm. flat, like someone practicing a word. So I ask her, "Did you open the door?" And she says, "Yes." And I swear, the moment I read that, my whole body felt hollow, like a pit opened up in my chest. Because when she heard that voice, I was still asleep at my own house, miles away. Then the third thing happened, and this one still makes me feel like I'm holding my breath even when I talk about it. About a week after my mom's door incident, my dad tells me he woke up around 1 a.m. and went into the kitchen because he thought he heard something. And when he got there, he saw me standing in their kitchen, not moving, facing the oven. He couldn't see my face fully, but he said he knew it was me in the same way you know someone's silhouette. Same height, same hair, same shape. Just me, standing there in the dark like a mannequin. And again, he tells me this while I'm sitting in my own home, nowhere near them. I asked him, "Are you sure you weren't dreaming?" And he got quiet and said, "I don't think I was." And that's when I started feeling like I couldn't trust the walls anymore. Like something had picked me as a costume. Like something was borrowing my voice, my outline, my name, wearing me like a mask and walking up to the people who love me most. Fast forward to now. Evan and I moved into a new apartment, a few states away. Fresh start, new place, new air, new everything. And I thought distance would make it stop. But I'm still on edge all the time. I'm jumpy. I check corners without meaning to. I hate walking through the apartment in the dark. Some nights I'm scared to fall asleep, because part of me worries that if I drift off, something will take that moment, like it's waiting for the exact second I'm not fully in control. I've tried cleansing the place. I've done the whole fresh energy thing. Open windows, salt, prayers, incense, all of it. And maybe it helped the apartment feel lighter for a day or two, but it didn't help my nervous system. I'm still carrying that fear like a weight in my ribs. And I know some people would say, it's just sleep paralysis, it's just stress. And I get that. I want it to be that. But explain the back door. Explain my dad seeing me in the kitchen. Explain my mother opening the door to a voice that sounded like me when I was nowhere near that house. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I moved, but the feeling followed. And I'm trying so hard to calm down and feel safe again. I just don't know how to convince my body that it's over. Hey, so I've been carrying this around for a while, and I just need to say it out loud to someone who'll really listen. Earlier this month, my dad's name was Ron, but everyone called him Ronnie, ended up in the hospital. He'd been feeling off for a bit, like run down in that stubborn, "I'm fine" way dads do. He kept insisting it was just the flu or some bug he'd shake off. And then, on his birthday, he went into cardiac arrest. Here's the part that still makes my stomach drop. His birthday is also the same day my mom died, 10 years ago. Cancer, same date. I don't even know what to do with that. I'm not trying to turn it into some sign or meaning. It's just always felt eerie to me. Like life can be way too precise in the worst ways. They brought him back after the arrest, though. They got a pulse. And for a moment, we were just hopeful. Like, okay, he's still here. We've got a chance. But the truth is, he'd been really sick for years. Since around 2020, honestly. He was tough as nails and would act like everything was normal, but it wasn't. He had a long list of health problems. At one point, he needed a trach, and after that, it felt like hospitals became part of our routine. In and out, over and over. ICU more than once. Near misses that still don't feel real when I look back. It was like he kept slipping away and somehow clawing his way back. After the cardiac arrest, they put him on life support. He needed a lot. High oxygen, the ventilator doing so much of the work, numbers that never really improved the way we kept praying they would. He drifted in and out of consciousness, like he was halfway here and halfway somewhere else. And he stayed in ICU like that, almost 2 weeks. They tried to turn things down, settings, oxygen, meds, and nothing would budge. Nothing. He had pneumonia, but not the typical kind. The doctors explained it was the kind immunocompromised people get. And then, on top of that, there were 2 other infections in his lungs that just would not move, no matter what antibiotics or treatments they tried. Every day felt like waiting for someone to tell us if today was the day things finally turned around, or the day they didn't. And I kept thinking, my dad wanted to live. He was the kind of person who would choose, save me at all costs. He wasn't someone who would quietly give up. So I held on to that, like determination could carry him through. But his body was exhausted. Last Friday, I was at work when palliative care called. They told me to come right away. Immediately. My heart started racing before they even finished the sentence, because you don't get a call like that unless something has shifted. When we got there, they were gentle but clear. They said the chances of him making it out, like really making it out, were very slim. And they explained what the next steps could look like, keeping him on everything, hoping for something that wasn't showing signs of happening, or moving him to comfort care and letting him go peacefully. And then came the decision. It was me and my stepmom, Lena. We're the ones who had to choose. And I don't even know how to describe what that feels like. It's not like making a decision in real life, where you weigh pros and cons. This was deciding whether to keep fighting with machines when his body was already screaming, I can't. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Nothing comes close. I stayed with him the entire day. So many people came. Family, friends, people I didn't even expect. And weirdly, that made me happy in the middle of all this pain, because he was loved. So loved. There was support wrapped around him, even if he couldn't fully take it in. We didn't tell him exactly what we were doing. We didn't say, we're taking you off everything. I couldn't. I didn't want him to be scared. I had already seen so much fear in his eyes during those 2 weeks, this wide, helpless fear, like he didn't know what was happening or who to trust. He'd had ICU delirium too. They had to restrain him at times because he'd reach for tubes, try to pull things out. Watching that, I felt sick. He looked so vulnerable, so trapped, like his body and brain were both fighting battles he didn't sign up for. And he never trusted hospitals. He just didn't. Being there made him anxious even on the best days, and now he was stuck there, unable to fully communicate, surrounded by alarms and strangers. At one point, I asked a doctor if I was doing the right thing. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't about to ruin my life with regret. And the doctor looked at me and said something I'll never forget. You're not making the choice. His body is. He's tired. When it was time, they started the medications to keep him comfortable. And I thought, okay, maybe this part will be gentle. Maybe he'll just slip away. But watching him die was horrible. It took a little over 2 hours, and it didn't look peaceful the way people sometimes describe. It looked like his body was still trying to hang on, even as we were begging it to let go. The meds helped, but there were moments where it felt like he was fighting through them. I remember thinking, what if he thinks we abandoned him? What if he's trying to tell us something and can't? I kept asking if he was in pain, over and over. I'd lean in and ask, "Ronnie, are you hurting?" And he shook his head no. That matters. I know it does. But still, my brain keeps replaying everything and trying to turn it into a trial where I'm the defendant. And then there's this other piece that's been haunting me. I heard them mention ICU beds, like there were people waiting, really sick, needing space. And it made this ugly doubt bloom in my chest. What if they pushed us toward this decision because they needed the bed? I don't even like admitting I thought that, because I know he wasn't getting better. I know the infections weren't moving. I know the settings couldn't come down. I know all the facts. But grief doesn't live in facts. Grief lives in what if. Because he's been in ICU before and somehow made it out. More than once. He was a fighter. So now I keep thinking, what if this could have been another one of those times? What if he would have turned a corner on day 15, day 16? My sister, Maya, she wasn't POA. It was just me and Lena. But she questioned us. Not in a cruel way, just in a scared way. She said, "What if he can get better?" And that sentence has been bouncing around in my head ever since, like a pinball I can't stop. And then, there's this other thing I'm almost embarrassed to say out loud, but it's real. Sometimes I knew when someone was going to die. With my mom, I had this knowing. With pets, with a couple other people. And with my dad, I had this horrible, quiet certainty about his age. I kept thinking my mom would be 53 and my dad would be 62. And they both passed right after turning those ages. Like, right after. That knowing has given me so much anxiety because I kept hoping I was wrong. This past Christmas, my boyfriend, Ethan, and I stayed longer at my dad's house than usual because something in me was screaming that time was running out. And now I keep replaying that too, like, did I sense it? Or did I create it? The part that hurts in a completely different way is this. I'm not even 30 yet, and I've lost both my parents. And I'm struggling. I'm really struggling. But I also feel relief, and then I feel guilty for the relief, because he's not sick anymore. He's not scared in a hospital bed anymore. He's not fighting infections and machines and delirium, and I'm not waking up every day with that heavy dread in my chest, wondering if today is the day I get that phone call. I worried about him every single day since 2020. Every day. And now, that part is over. And I hate myself a little for admitting that it's a relief. But it's true. I felt something similar when my mom died too. She was so sick, and watching her suffer was its own kind of torture. When she passed, there was grief, and there was also this quiet release, like the suffering had finally stopped. So now I'm here, holding all of it at once. Love, loss, guilt, relief, doubt, and this endless loop of what if. And honestly, it just really sucks. So, I've got to tell you about the house I grew up in, because it's the kind of place that feels like it's holding its breath. It's an old home, built back in the 1920s by a family in town called the Harrisons. And from what I've been able to piece together over the years, they went through a kind of grief that just stains a place. You know what I mean? Like the walls remember. The mother, her name was Edith, she lived a long life, and she eventually passed from natural causes, right there at her little writing desk in the kitchen, downstairs. That part is sad, obviously, but I've never felt like she stayed. Same with the rest of the family, honestly. But the upstairs? That's different. Upstairs has always felt occupied. When I was younger, I didn't have a name for it. I just knew there was something up there, especially near the landing, where you can look down over the staircase. It was like there was a heaviness parked in that spot, like an invisible person who never moved on. Years later, after I got older and started digging into the history, I learned about Edith's son. His name was Daniel Harrison Jr., and his story hit me right in the chest. In the late 1950s, Daniel got wrecked by life in a way that's painfully human. He'd lost his money, bad business decisions, debts piling up, and on top of that, his marriage fell apart in this ugly, drawn-out divorce. The kind where you don't just lose a partner, you lose your sense of who you are. He ended up moving back into the house with his mother, kind of defeated, kind of stuck. People around town described him as quiet after that, which is such a gentle way to say someone is drowning. And eventually, he couldn't take it anymore. From what I've been told, and what records hint at, Daniel went upstairs and took his own life, right above that landing that overlooks the stairs. The exact place that's always felt wrong to me. That detail made my stomach flip when I first read it, because it was like the house finally explained itself. I'll be honest, finding out his name weirdly made me feel calmer. Not because it isn't tragic, it is. It's awful. But because it meant the presence I'd lived with all those years didn't feel like some faceless monster. It felt like a person. A desperate, hurting person. And I hate admitting this, but I understood it. I've never wanted to die, not truly, and I wouldn't do that to myself. But I know what it's like to brush up against depression so hard, you start thinking thoughts that scare you. That dark, hopeless tunnel feeling. So when I learned Daniel's story, I felt sad, but not terrified. It made the haunted feeling upstairs feel less like something evil, and more like grief that never got put down. And listen, it isn't just me. So many strange things have happened in that house. Things my siblings experienced. Things friends experienced when they stayed over. Even people in my town have told me stories about weird moments in that house, like they already knew it had a reputation. And some of them added little details about deaths and tragedies connected to it, like the place has been whispered about for decades. More recently, my own grandmother passed away in the house. But I didn't feel her. I didn't feel Edith either. Downstairs feels quiet in that way. Sad memories, sure, but not present. The only thing I've ever truly felt as a presence is still upstairs. That same heavy, watchful feeling I've known since childhood. And now, I believe it's Daniel. There's this video I took recently because I wanted proof, or at least something tangible. In it, you'll hear me actually call his name. I'm talking to him like he can hear me, like he's right there. And while I'm standing at the bottom of the staircase, the stairs leading up to where he died, you hear this loud thump. Just a solid hit, like something heavy dropped. And then a few seconds later, you hear two loud scraping sounds, like something dragged across the floor up there. And the thing is, nobody was upstairs. No friends, no siblings, nothing. And none of my pets were up there either. I checked. I always check. So when I listen back to that audio, I get this chill. Not the horror movie kind, not the run for your life kind. More like that unmistakable feeling of being responded to. Like something heard me. Like someone heard their name. And I don't know if that's comforting or devastating, but I know the upstairs still doesn't feel empty. Not even after all these years. Okay, so I tried sharing this in a quantum physics thread and it was a mistake. I got mocked, and I'm not here for that. I'm here because I want something real. A recording, a credible witness, or even a grounded explanation for something that happened in my home. Twice. Both times it was the same thing. A loud, joyful voice blurting out, "Allo!" Not in my head, not a felt presence, not telepathy. An actual sound in the air, like something spoke out loud in the room with me. The kind of sound that makes your body jolt before you even think. The first time it happened, I was in the living room. It was early evening, already dark outside, maybe around 5:15-ish. I wasn't stressed. I wasn't drunk or high. I was just normal. And suddenly, right beside me, like half an arm's length away, "Allo!" It was so close I could practically map it in space. The sound felt wide, like it had presence, not thin like someone shouting through a phone. More like a voice projected into the room, the way a nearby speaker fills the air around you. I jumped. My two cats, Miso and Juniper, jumped too, instantly bristling and scanning. They didn't react like, "Oh, a noise." They reacted like something had appeared. The second time was weeks later, late at night, close to midnight. Different room, the kitchen, right next to the living room. Same exact voice, same tone, same cheerful, almost sing-song delivery. "Allo!" And again, no visible source. But I could place where it came from, and this time it felt farther, like it came from the back corner of the kitchen. Here's the part that keeps getting under my skin. My cats didn't just startle. They tracked something. Right after the voice, both of them locked onto the same spot near the pantry area, the way cats do when they're watching a bug. Except there was nothing there. They followed it like it was moving, sometimes still, then suddenly darting fast, like it could zip from one place to another. Juniper stayed on it for nearly 15 minutes, pacing and staring, then whipping her head to a new point like whatever it was had jumped. I picked her up to calm her down. Didn't matter. Her eyes kept snapping back to it. She was tense, not curious. And cats get spooked by weird things all the time, sure, but both of them reacting the same way, right after the same voice, twice? That's what I can't shrug off. If it had happened once, I could have convinced myself it was a fluke. Neighbors, a radio, some odd acoustic trick, my brain misfiring, whatever. But it happened twice, in two adjacent rooms, with the same exact word and same older woman vibe to the voice. And this is an old house, about a century old, so of course everyone wants to jump straight to ghost stories. But that's not where I'm going with this. I'm not interested in myths, religion, or feeding fear. I'm not trying to turn this into a spooky campfire tale. I want facts, or at least theories that respect reality. Acoustics, electronics, weird interference, something environmental. Anything that could create a clean external voice in open air that two cats and a human all react to at the same moment. So if anyone has had something like this, an actual audible voice in the room, not imagined, especially with an animal reacting too, I want to hear it. Ideally with a recording, or an honest, detailed account, or a theory that doesn't treat me like I'm stupid for asking. That's all. I'm just looking for something solid. Hey, okay. I know this is going to sound dramatic right out of the gate, but please just hear me out. I honestly don't even know where to put all of this, or who to say it to, so I'm kind of just talking into the void and hoping someone understands. Because for the past year, it's like my life has been getting yanked apart piece by piece, and the weirdest part is how relentless it's been. Like there's never a break, never a moment where things actually stay okay. It started with my mom, Marisol, getting sick. Not like a bad week sick. I mean, sick to the point where she could barely sit up, couldn't work, couldn't even really function. And while we were trying to figure out what was going on with her, my stepdad, Darius, got arrested. Just like that. Suddenly, he's gone, and everything in the house shifts. And I'm the oldest, so guess who becomes the adult overnight? There were a few days where it was literally just me watching my little brothers and sister, feeding them, keeping them calm, trying to act like I wasn't panicking, because my mom was out of the country at the time handling something family-related. I remember thinking, okay, this is bad, but we can survive bad. Then the car got taken. Then we lost the house. And I'm not exaggerating when I say it felt like every time we got close to landing somewhere stable, something random would happen. A paperwork issue, a sudden rejection, somebody changing their mind last minute, like an invisible hand slapping the door shut right as we reached it. We ended up technically homeless. For a little while, we were sleeping on these cheap blow-up mattresses in a place we weren't even supposed to be staying. Not because we wanted to, because we had nowhere else. Every night, I'd lie there, listening for footsteps, terrified the owner would walk in and we'd get thrown out on the spot. We got lucky. Nobody showed up. Eventually, we found another place. It wasn't perfect, but it was a roof and walls and a lock on the door. And for a second, I thought, okay, maybe this is the turn. But the money problems didn't stop. It was always something. Always. And now, we're homeless again. And this is where it starts feeling like more than just life being hard, you know? Because our landlord, out of nowhere, completely flipped on Darius, like a switch. And he tells us, basically last minute, that we need to pay $5,000 or we need to be out by early morning the next day. Early morning. Like we're not people, like we're not a family, like we can just spawn $5,000 out of thin air overnight. And the thing is, we'd only been in that place for a little over 4 months. 4 months. Who gets forced out that fast? We've never had an eviction on our record. Ever. Which makes it worse, because now it's going to follow us. Like a stain we didn't even earn. And here's the part that messes with my head the most. Darius was supposed to start a new job in early February. A really good one. The kind of job that would have finally put us on solid ground. Like, we could breathe again. We wouldn't have to keep doing that desperate math in our heads every day. And that's what I mean when I say it feels like every time something good shows up, something else rushes in to ruin it before it can land. I know life has ups and downs, I get that. But this has felt like a constant downhill slide with no bottom. Like we're running in place in a storm and getting punished for even trying. Right now we're in this gross little motel, just for a week. One of those places where the carpet feels damp even when it's dry, and everything smells like old smoke no matter what. And once this week is over, I honestly don't know what happens next. And okay, this is where it gets weird. Like, really weird. Because it's not just the bad luck. A couple weeks before we got kicked out, I started noticing things in the house shifting on their own. Small stuff at first, like I'd set something down and it wouldn't be where I left it. Or I'd see something move just slightly out of the corner of my eye. And I tried to rationalize it, because that's what you do. You tell yourself you're tired, stressed, imagining things. But then last night, we had the TV on, and listen, every time we put on a horror movie, especially ones about demonic stuff, the TV would just shut off. Like someone hit the power button. But when we switched to something normal, like a comedy, it stayed on. No problem. No flickering. No shutting off. And I know how that sounds. I do. I'm already hearing the comments in my head. It's a glitch. It's the remote. It's the outlet. But it happened more than once, and only with those movies. And it felt targeted, like a warning. Then my little brother, Eli, tells me he woke up a few nights ago around 3 a.m. and heard someone whistling. Not outside, not faint, like it was in the place. A tune, like somebody just casually whistling while everyone was asleep. No one else was up. And I swear to you, I'm not trying to write a horror story. I wish this was fake. I wish I could laugh about it and say I was being dramatic. But I can't shake the feeling that something is hanging over us. Like something got invited in somehow, and now it's just feeding off everything. Every time we try to climb out, it yanks us back down. I don't know if it's a curse or some kind of entity, or just the cruelest streak of coincidences I've ever seen, but it feels eerie in my bones. And I'm sitting here, in this motel, trying to keep my siblings calm, trying to act normal, while inside I'm thinking, what if this isn't normal? What if something is actually wrong? And what do you even do when you don't know what you're fighting? So, something really weird happened a couple nights ago, and it's still giving me that gross, crawly, icked out feeling. I figured I'd tell you like I'd tell a friend, because I honestly don't know what to make of it. Okay, context first. My partner, Marin, and I have this goofy little thing we do when we're being dumb together. It's this super specific, high-pitched tongue trill sound, like a rapid little chir-chir-chir. Not a word, not a whistle, not a bird call, just this ridiculous noise we bounce back and forth when we're feeling playful. And the thing is, it's so oddly specific that we've never heard anyone else make it. Not on TV, not out in public, not anywhere. That night was just one of those cozy, giggly nights. We each had one gummy, nothing wild, put on a playlist, watched a couple movies on the couch, and were generally being idiots in the best way. At some point, we definitely did our little trill at each other a few times, laughing like children. Around midnight, we wandered into the bedroom and crashed pretty quickly. Like, lights out, done. And then, 3:31 a.m. I wake up instantly to that exact trill sound, the exact one I just described, coming from the living room. Not muffled, not distant, not like maybe that was a pipe or maybe that was the building settling. It sounded clear, like it was happening in our apartment, in that room, right where we'd been earlier. At first, I'm trying to talk myself down like, okay, nightmare, brain replaying nonsense. But then I roll over, and Marin is already sitting straight up in bed too, wide awake, staring toward the door. We just looked at each other for a second, one of those silent, loaded looks like, please tell me you heard that. Then she whispers my name and goes, was that? And she immediately starts calling for our cat, Pepper, thinking maybe Pepper made some weird meow or chirp. Except Pepper was asleep, curled up right by the bed. Didn't even flinch. Full-on cozy coma. That's when my stomach dropped. I got up fast, like heart racing fast, and did the most cliché thing ever. I cleared the apartment. Bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, living room, behind the shower curtain, everything. I checked the front door, checked the windows. Nothing. No one. Just our quiet apartment, exactly as we left it. And then I stood there in the living room, in the dark, with this gross feeling like I wasn't supposed to be there. I've tried so hard to explain it in a normal way. We live in an older building, but it's solid. The walls are thick enough that we barely hear our neighbors. Sometimes we'll hear faint footsteps from upstairs, but voices are rare, and if we do hear anything, it's always muted, always, obviously, through a wall. Even storms can roll in and we won't notice until we look outside. And what we heard wasn't even loud. That's the creepy part. It was just distinct. like it was close enough to be personal. The obvious explanations don't sit right either. It was a dream doesn't work because we both woke up at the same time and both reacted. And Marin sleeps like a rock. She's the kind of sleeper who could snooze through a parade. The gummy angle doesn't fully land for me either, because sure, weird half-dreams happen, but both of us hearing the same specific sound at the same moment? So yeah, we don't feel unsafe exactly. It's not like we're terrified to go home or anything. It's more like we feel watched by the moment, if that makes sense. Like something reached into our space just enough to remind us it could. So I'm sitting here with this lingering, uneasy question. What was that? And has anything like this ever happened to you? Because I keep replaying that clear, ridiculous trill in my head, and I swear it makes my skin crawl every time. So I grew up in Shropshire, in England, and this happened when I was about 4, maybe 5. We were living in our very first proper family house. It was a new build, still smelled a bit like fresh plaster and carpet, and there hadn't been anyone in it before us. Late 90s, around 1998 or 1999. I was never one of those kids who just went to sleep when you told them to. My mom in this story is called Claire. She'd do the whole routine, tuck me in, read me a little book, leave the nightlight on, kiss on the forehead, the usual. And then she'd leave, and I'd lie there, wide awake. Most nights I'd keep myself busy. I had this little pile of Lego I'd quietly play with. Quiet enough that I thought I was getting away with it. Or I'd creep out onto the landing because our cat Marmalade used to hang out at the top of the stairs like he owned the place. He'd rub his head against my legs and purr like a little engine. That kind of thing makes you feel safe when you're small. But this one night, nothing dramatic happened at bedtime. I actually fell asleep pretty fast. No creeping around, no Lego, no cat patrol on the landing. Just sleep. And then I woke up. And when I say I woke up, I mean I woke up blind. My eyes were sealed shut. Not like it's dark so I can't see, but like I physically couldn't open them. I remember panicking for half a second, shuffling my hands up to my face, and my fingers just stuck. They were coated in that gritty sleep gunk, whatever people call it, the crust that gathers in the corners of your eyes. Mine was everywhere, like I'd been crying or something, but I hadn't. So I'm there, this tiny kid, clawing at my own eyelids, trying not to freak out. I dig the stuff away, blink, 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 and my eyes finally open. And I'm not in my bedroom. I'm downstairs. I'm in the living room. Now, to make this clear, my bedroom was upstairs, first floor. The living room was at the bottom of the stairs, off to the left. And at night, that living room door was always shut. Proper habit in our house. Like, shut. I just remember sitting there, blinking in the dimness, thinking, hang on, what? Even at that age, it didn't feel scary. It felt wrong in a way I didn't have words for, like a storybook page had been put in the wrong place. I don't remember crying. I don't remember screaming for my parents. I just sort of accepted it with that weird child logic of, well, I'm here now, aren't I? And the strangest part? I didn't even tell my parents. Not that morning, not later. It's like my brain filed it away under odd and moved on. The day went on normally. Breakfast, cartoons, whatever kids do. No big moment where I sat my mom and dad down and said, by the way, I teleported downstairs in my sleep. But that night was different. As soon as bedtime came around, I got this pure, ugly terror in my chest, like the air in my room had turned heavy. The nightlight suddenly felt useless, like putting a plaster on something massive. I remember just knowing something was coming. Not imagining, not guessing, knowing. That kind of fear where your body decides before your thoughts do. So I bolted. I ran straight into my parents' room. My dad, let's call him Gareth, was normally strict. Very, "You're fine, go back to bed," sort of parent. But that night, even he let me climb in. Eventually, I fell asleep. Then I woke up again, still dark. The kind of dark where you don't know if it's midnight or 3 in the morning. And something grabbed me. Not a gentle tug, not I rolled and felt weird. Something dragged me down the bed, towards the foot. I remember the fabric pulling under my back and the sudden, shocking lift. My right leg was yanked up into the air like someone had hooked their hand around my ankle. I'm frozen. I can't speak. I can't even properly breathe. And at the foot of the bed, there's this figure, this tall, black shape. Not like a shadow from a coat, not like your eyes playing tricks. It had definition. It was there. I remember a face, not a normal one, just eyes and a mouth. The mouth was open, like it was stretching wider than it should, and it was holding my foot up in front of it, like it was inspecting it, or claiming it, or something. I was absolutely terrified, the kind of terror that makes your stomach drop out of your body. And then, this is the bit that always makes my throat tighten. I think I passed out, not fell asleep, passed out. Because the next thing I remember is morning, and here's where it stops being something you can brush off as just a nightmare. When I woke up, the bottom of my right foot, the skin was dead. Not bruised, not scraped, not sore. Dead skin, white and papery, like the top layer had been cooked or dried out. And it peeled away the way sunburn peels. Just that thin sheet lifting off, revealing normal skin underneath. Only it hadn't been sunny. And it hadn't hurt. There was no blistering pain, no sting, none of that. It was just gone. I showed my parents. My mom, Claire, tried to explain it away, of course. She said maybe I'd stepped into a bath that was too hot, or maybe I'd done something and not noticed. But I hadn't. And even if I had, it would have hurt. Kids don't ignore burns. You scream with burns. But I didn't have a memory of pain. Just the memory of that dark room, that dragging, that foot held in the air, that black figure at the end of the bed. Even now, thinking about it, I get that sick drop in my stomach, like my body remembers it before my mind does. I've had a few smaller, strange moments since then in my life, nothing as clear as that, and I've gone back and forth on what I believe about anything supernatural. I'm not someone who wants everything to be ghosts and monsters, but that's one of the only things I've never been able to shrug off. Because I can explain fear. I can explain nightmares. I can't explain waking up with the skin on the bottom of my right foot peeling away like it had been taken from me. I don't usually nap. Like, I'm one of those people who thinks, I'll just rest my eyes for a second, and then I'm instantly alert again. But this one afternoon, late in the day, sun still up, the house quiet, I just gave in. I'd had a long week, my head felt heavy, so I stretched out on the couch and told myself I'd take 10 minutes. No anxiety, no weird vibes, nothing dramatic. I fell asleep the normal way, soft, ordinary, like slipping under warm water. And then, it started. In the dream, if it was a dream, I was lying exactly like I had been in real life. Same position, same sense of weight in my body. Except I wasn't alone. Above me stood this figure. Not a person, not really. More like a shape that borrowed the outline of a human. Tall, dark, featureless. No face, no eyes. Just a presence that felt heavy in the air, like a storm cloud pressed into the room. And it wasn't just standing there to scare me. It was taking something. That's the part I still struggle to explain without sounding dramatic. because it wasn't metaphorical. I didn't just feel afraid. I felt something being pulled out of me, like a slow, forceful tug from inside my chest and spine, like my insides were being emptied. My breath got thin, my thoughts got fuzzy around the edges. I remember thinking, half panicked, half confused, what is it taking? Energy? Spirit? Consciousness? I don't know, but the sensation was so physical, so real, that it didn't feel like a bad dream. It felt like I was being drained. And then something in me snapped into action. Not bravery, not logic, instinct. I fought back. I didn't sit there and think, okay, here's what I'll do. It was immediate, like pulling your hand away from a hot stove. I pushed with my mind the way you push with muscles. I gathered everything I had, every ounce of will, focus, stubbornness, and shoved it back toward myself like I was yanking a door shut. And I swear to you, it felt like a struggle. Not like punching or wrestling, but like two forces pulling on the same rope, and the rope was me, my whole being. There was pressure, resistance, a tug of war happening in a place that wasn't exactly the room, but wasn't exactly my imagination either. I remember one clear thought, almost like a growl. No, you don't get to have that. And I pushed harder, like I poured my entire self into one final surge. And then it stopped. Not gradually, not fading, just gone. Like I'd wrenched something back and the figure had lost its grip. And right after that, I woke up. But here's what's strange. I didn't wake up screaming. I didn't bolt upright. I just opened my eyes, calmly, like someone had flipped a switch. Only, I felt wrong. My body was heavy, like my bones were packed with sand. My arms and legs felt drained, and my head felt hollowed out. Not sleepy, not groggy. Exhausted in a way that felt earned, like I'd just run a mile in panic. The room looked normal. The light was the same. The air was the same. But I wasn't. I sat there for a minute, blinking, trying to convince myself it was just a nightmare. But my chest still felt like something had been pulling at it. I stood up and my legs wobbled a little, just enough to make me pause. So I went outside. I remember walking down the street and focusing on simple things. The sound of traffic, the wind moving through leaves, the smell of someone's laundry detergent drifting from a balcony. I kept breathing in, like I was trying to refill myself. It took a while, maybe 40 minutes, maybe longer, before I felt even halfway normal again. And the part that still messes with me is this. That was it. No repeats. No ever since then. No pattern. No follow-up. And yet that one afternoon, it was like something reached into me and tried to take a piece. So of course I've tried to explain it. Hypnagogic hallucination. Stress. A fluke of brain chemistry. Some strange overlap between dreaming and waking. And I can accept all of that, intellectually. But then I remember the feeling of resistance, the sensation of winning. The way it didn't just fade, it retreated, like it met something in me it didn't expect. And I don't know. Part of me still believes that day wasn't just a dream. Part of me believes I pushed something away, something invisible that tried its luck, and when I fought back, it decided I wasn't worth the effort. Maybe it was nothing. Or maybe, for one quiet afternoon, I really did face something I can't name, and I didn't let it take what was mine.